I spent 46 years being the nicest man in my family, and it cost me exactly 80,000 yuan, which was, apparently, more than my life was worth to them. Let me back up. Late autumn, the year 2000. Qinghe County People's Hospital, the intensive care unit. There was a man in the bed so thin he was mostly outline, sunken eyes, cheekbones you could hang a coat on, the veins on the backs of his hands standing up like tree roots that had given up on the soil. An oxygen tube in his nose, a heart monitor beeping beside him, each beep a little quieter than the last, like it was counting down to something and trying to be polite about it. That man was me, Chen Weidong, and I was dying of the cheapest thing in the world, a surgery my family could afford and chose not to pay for. I drifted in and out. When I was clear, I could hear them in the corridor, arguing in those hospital whispers that are somehow louder than shouting. My eldest daughter, Chen Xiaoling, 23 and already worn down to the grain, begging her grandfather, "Grandpa, can't you think of something?" She'd scraped together 2,000 yuan from people who could spare even less than she could. My father's voice, old and tired and rehearsed. "Xiaoling, it's not that Grandpa doesn't want to help. Grandpa's short on money too. You know how it is." And then my wife, Li Fenghua, the woman who'd been quiet for 20 years, quiet the way a plantain is quiet, steps on it, it doesn't make a sound. Except she wasn't quiet anymore. "Tight on cash?" Her voice came up off the floor like something rising. "Dad, hand on your heart. That 100,000 you saved for your own funeral, did you feed it to the dogs?" My mother detonated on cue. "How dare you, elders, ungrateful. We're poor farmers. Where would we ever get 100,000? The performance she'd been giving her whole life. But my wife had the receipts. "Last spring festival, you told Third Aunt yourself you and Dad had enough put away to buy 2 houses in the county. Third Aunt told me. Should I call her over so we can all confirm it together?" Silence in the corridor. The good kind, for once. My mother's mouth had finally hit a wall. And then Fenghua did the thing I will remember through every life I ever live. She stopped asking. She started reading the ledger. She turned to the whole family, my brothers, their wives, my sisters, all of them lined up in the hall like people at a bus stop, who'd very much like the bus to come so they could leave. And she read them my life, item by item. 1980. Big Brother was working the mountain quarry when the slope came down and rolled him 30 meters into a ravine. Who searched a full day and night and carried him out? Weidong. Just back from the army, bad knee and all, 10 hours in the dark. And when he found Big Brother, the man was already unconscious. He tied his own brother to his back and climbed out of that ditch one step at a time. His knees were swollen for 2 weeks after, couldn't bend them to walk. She looked at my eldest brother. "Do you remember that?" My brother, muffled. "I never said I didn't remember." "You didn't say you didn't remember. You just remembered it right now, watching him die inside that room waiting for money." She kept going. The third brother's wedding, the bride price, the furniture wood, the banquet hauled back from the county on a handcart, all of it paid out of my 800 yuan demobilization allowance. My youngest sister Chunli, beaten by the animal she'd married, running home in 1981, and the man who went to the Wang house, knocked out the husband's front tooth, and came back with his hands so bloody you couldn't tell whose blood it was, and sat in the yard and smoked half a pack and said one sentence. "My sister doesn't get beaten, not while I'm alive." Every name in that corridor got a receipt read back to them, and every one of them stood there and studied their own shoes. Then my wife asked my parents the only question left. "Dad, Mom, is your second son your real son?" "Of course he's my real son. 10 months I carried him." "Then why are you standing here watching him die?" That was when she broke. 20 years of swallowed grief came up all at once, and the last thing she said quietly, almost to herself, 80,000 yuan can save his life. It's not that you don't have it. It's that you think he isn't worth it. You think his life isn't worth 80,000. And that sentence went into me like a dull knife, because it was true, and because I was the one who taught them to believe it. I opened my eyes. The monitor started screaming. A nurse burst in shouting about the patient being agitated. "Where's the family?" And then they poured into the room, all of them, suddenly full of feeling now that there was an audience. Fenghua got to me first, both hands around mine. "Weidong, you're awake. Don't worry. I'll find the money. I'll find it." My daughters crowded the bed. Chen Xiaoling swearing she'd borrow from classmates, colleagues, anyone. My second daughter, Lin Wei, Couldn't even get words out, just gripped the corner of my blanket, shoulders shaking. I looked at the three of them. Really looked. My wife's hair had gone mostly white. 45 years old and built like 60, because that's what a life with me had cost her. My eldest daughter, married to a man who treated her like hired help, back here borrowing money she'd be punished for later. My second daughter, the worst of it, married off by my own mother to Wang the butcher, 15 years older, 3,000 yuan dowry, drank, and hit her. None of them were doing well. And the reason was me, because I was so good. So good I gave away every resource we had. So good I handed strangers the things that belonged to my own wife and children. So good I let people climb over my back to get ahead and then smiled and said, it's fine, we're family. I thought all that patience was building something. A close family. Brothers who'd stand by each other. I had been, it turns out, completely wrong. My eyes went past my wife and daughters to the row of them at the door. My father, lips trembling, nothing coming out. My mother, eyes red but the corners of her mouth pulled down. Less heartbreak, more embarrassment at having been read aloud. My third brother leaning on the frame, studying the ceiling. My third sister-in-law had actually turned her back to the bed. Only my fourth sister, Chen Chunhua, was fighting her own husband at the back of the crowd, the man hissing at her. Are you insane? Borrowing money? He's a lost cause. You want us to starve? And Chen Chunhua shaking him off and saying, soft and flat, that's my second brother. He was good to me. And pressing a handkerchief bundle into Fenghua's hands. 20,000 yuan. Everything she had. 20,000. Plus my daughter's scraps. Still 50,000 short of the number that would buy me a few more years. And I looked at all their faces, and something in me went very, very calm. The calm you get in the exact center of a storm. I thought about the chicken legs I gave my little brothers every New Year, eating the feet myself. The resettlement money I handed over so the third brother could marry. The good riverside field I gave up so my eldest brother could have the better land. A whole life of it. I'd treated everyone in the world well. Everyone except the one person I should have treated best. So I laughed. Small, light, like the last leaf coming off a branch in late autumn. And then I pulled out the oxygen tube. Fenghua screamed and lunged to put it back, and I found strength from somewhere and pushed her away. Tore off the monitor leads, one long flat shriek. My daughters grabbed my arms, and I looked at them and said the truest thing I knew. Dad made a lot of mistakes. The biggest one was thinking that if I was good to people, they'd be good to me.
Back. That's not how it works. Some people, the nicer you are, the more they're sure you can be pushed. You give an inch, they don't think you're kind. They think you'll give the next inch too. Dad's always been too easy to talk to. Next life. Next life I'll be different. I stood up barefoot on the cold floor and walked to the door, and the family that wouldn't spend 80,000 on me parted to let me pass, because that they could do for free. Nobody stopped me. Nobody dared. I heard Fenghua chasing, heard the stairwell window bang open, heard the wind rush in. Then a sound from below, and Fenghua's scream tearing through the whole building, scattering the crows out of the old locust tree into a gray, raining sky. Feng falling. Not the short fall from a building, a longer one. Down a well with no bottom, dark all around, except the dark had light in it. Broken light, a shattered mirror, every shard a piece of my life. Me at 18 in a new uniform at the village gate. Fenghua hiding at the back of the crowd, blushing. Me at 25 carrying my brother out of the mountains on ruined knees. Me at 43 on my knees in front of my mother, begging her not to marry my daughter to Wang the butcher, and my mother putting the 3,000 yuan dowry into the cabinet and saying a grown daughter kept at home only breeds resentment. All the shards spinning, folding into one white light. And a voice out of it, from very far away, or maybe from inside my own chest. He was wrong this life. If there's a next one, let him live it differently. I opened my eyes. The ceiling was not a hospital ceiling. It was a ceiling papered with old, yellowed newspaper, edges curling, a water stain in the corner shaped exactly like a cat lying down. The air didn't smell like disinfectant. It smelled like dirt and firewood and pig feed, the specific perfume of the Chinese countryside, 1980s edition. A rooster somewhere, the neighbor's dog, the village loudspeaker playing On the Fields of Hope, singing all the optimism the decade could hold. I turned my head. There was someone on the kang beside me, the heated brick bed, and it was Li Fenghua, not the white-haired woman from the corridor.
This Fenghua had 2 thick black braids and healthy wheat-brown skin and was frowning in her sleep like she was losing an argument in a dream.
and curled in her arms, a little girl about 3, one tuft of yellow hair sticking out. Chen Xiaoling. And beside her, a baby wrapped in an old quilt, mouth open, breathing soft. Lin Wei, 1 year old, alive, not yet sold to any butcher. I raised my hand, and it was a young man's hand, rough, calloused, but firm, the joints strong, not skin over bone. I sat up so fast I woke Fenghua, who blinked at me, rubbed her eyes, and mumbled that it wasn't light yet, sleep a while longer. I couldn't answer. I just stared at her 25-year-old face, the faint line already starting between her brows, the hard work mark, but her eyes bright and her cheeks with actual colour in them. She hadn't been crushed yet. There was still time. My eyes went hot. She reached up, worried now, feeling my forehead for fever, asking if I'd had a nightmare. A nightmare, yes, one that had lasted 20 years. I found the old cloth bag in the bottom of the cabinet. Inside, a wad of crumpled bills, 327 yuan and 60 cents.
Everything I owned in the world. And in my old life, this was the money my mother came and borrowed that very day and never gave back. The first domino. The one that started 20 years of me handing over everything I had until there was nothing left to hand over but my own life out a window. I wrapped the money back up and buried it in the deepest corner of the cabinet. Then I stood in the sunrise coming through the window, my wife and daughters asleep behind me, and I said it out loud, quiet, every word squeezed out between my teeth. This life, I'm not putting up with it anymore. Because I knew what today was. Today my mother would walk in after breakfast to borrow 300 yuan, and this time, she was going to get a very different answer. She showed up right on schedule, mud on her black cloth shoes from walking over from the old house, silver hairpin in her bun, that faded blue jacket. And the second she stepped through the door, her eyes went straight to the cabinet in the corner. I knew that look. I'd been the target of that look for 20 years. In the old life, it came with a warm-up act. Sit down, chat about the weather, ask after the children, and then, smooth as flowing water, the pivot to money. My mother knew her second son too well. Say, your family's struggling. Say, your big brother's having a hard time. And I'd soften and nod and take out the cash. 20 years, and it worked every single time. Wei Dong, have you eaten? Eating now. I was sitting at the table over a bowl of cornmeal porridge so thin I could see my own reflection in it, half a piece of pickled vegetable next to it. My daughters ate at the little table. Chen Xiaoling spooning rice cereal into Lin Wei one careful mouthful at a time. Cereal Fenghua ground special for the baby while she and Ling drank the porridge you could read a newspaper through. My mother waved off the offer of a bowl, sighed, and began the performance. Your big brother just finished the house. He's buried in debt. Lend him what you've got to tide him over. And she watched my face while she said it, because the watching was the whole trick. Old me would have nodded right here. I took a slow sip of porridge. Mom, I need that money. Her smile froze like a pond in November. I told her I was fixing up the house. The roof let in the wind and the rain, and Fenghua and the children couldn't take another winter like the last. She recovered, pasted the smile back on, said, Oh, this room's fine. Make do. Your brother's the one who needs it now. Pay it back when he's on his feet. No need, I said. It's my family's business. I'll handle it. As for big brother, let him handle his. The smile came all the way off. How can you talk like that? That's your own brother. I know he's my brother. I also have a wife and 2 kids to feed. And here's the thing I'd never done in 20 years. I didn't stop there. I opened the ledger on her. The 800 yuan resettlement allowance that paid the third brother's bride price and furniture and banquet, not a fen of it returned. The 50 she took last month for grain tax. The 100 the month before for dad's back. I listed it flat, like reading off an account book, and with every line her face went a shade darker. Look at what we eat, Mom. I pointed at the porridge. Fenghua hasn't bought a stitch of new clothing since New Year. Xiaoling's shoes have holes clean through the soles. Wei Wei's 1-year-old needs the nutrition, and we can't afford formula, so it's rice water. It's not that I won't help big brother. It's that I can't. My own family's drowning. There is nothing a person can say to that. My mother sat on the edge of the kang a long while, lips working, and produced nothing. She stood, brushed dust off her pants that wasn't there, and at the door she turned. Wei Dong, what's wrong with you today? Take the wrong medicine? I didn't turn around. Didn't take the wrong medicine,
Just figured some things out. She snorted, slammed the door hard enough to shake dust off the wall, and left. The room went quiet. Feng Hua stood by the Kang with Lin Wei on her hip, staring at me like she was meeting me for the first time. Her voice shook. Wei Dong, what happened to you? You've never dared talk to your mother like that. I took the baby from her and held her. 1-year-old, soft, grape-dark eyes, reaching up to grab my nose and going, ah, ah. In the old life, this child got handed to Wang the butcher, and her father, me, said nothing. I looked up at Feng Hua and said, it's slow, one word at a time. From today, nothing that belongs to this family goes to anyone else. Not one fen, not one grain of rice. And Li Fenghua started to cry. She'd waited years to hear it. From the first day she married me, she'd watched me get worked like an ox by my own blood, watched the best of everything go to everyone but us. She'd begged me, fought me, once even threatened divorce, and I never changed, because I always had the same 3 words, we're all family. And now, in front of my mother, I'd finally said no. I took her hand. Rough, cracked, knuckles gone slightly crooked from work, a hand that should have been held soft in a man's hands and instead had followed me into 2 decades of hardship. Feng Hua, I used to be a bastard, always thinking about helping this one and that one, and it was you and the kids I made suffer for it. That's done. We live our own life now. Nobody takes from this family again. She covered her face and sobbed like she was trying to pour out 20 years all at once. And the crying set off Chen Xiaoling, who ran over and grabbed her mother's leg, and that set off Lin Wei, who had no idea what was happening, but wasn't going to be left out. The whole family of 4 standing in a drafty mud brick house, crying together. And I didn't feel heartbroken at all. I felt light. The loudspeaker outside had switched to Li Guyi singing Hometown Love, and I held my baby and my wife's hand and looked at my older daughter's wet face and made the only promise that mattered. This life, none of you suffers again. The word travels fast in a family like mine. The 3rd brother showed up that same afternoon. Lin Guodong rolled in on his 28-inch bicycle with a bulging canvas bag on the back rack, walked a lap of the main room with his eyes snagging on the cabinet for a solid 2 seconds, and dropped onto the stool by the stove with a Da Qianmen cigarette already in his mouth. I was in the yard splitting firewood. A locust log thick as a bowl came apart with 1 crack. Second brother, what are you up to? Splitting wood. He lit up, blew a string of smoke rings, squinted. Got something to run by you. Found work in town, hauling freight for people, 40-some a month. Only thing is, they want a deposit up front, 200. I'm a little short. Thought I'd borrow it off you. My axe stopped in the air. Because I'd heard this speech before, word for word, in another life. The freight job, the deposit, borrow a little. I believed it that time and handed over the last of what I had, and he took the money, bought his wife a wristwatch, and treated his buddies to dinner. The freight business? I never once saw a truck. No money. The axe came down. Crack! He nearly dropped his cigarette. Second brother, what'd you say? I said I've got no money. I straightened up and wiped my forehead. When are you paying back the 300 you borrowed for your wedding? His face changed. Second brother, that 300, that wasn't a loan. That was you helping out. I meant it as a loan. Calm voice, not calm eyes. Third brother, you've got it backwards. He stubbed out the cigarette, stood, the smile gone completely. You talked to Mom like this today too, huh? She came home spitting mad, said you'd turned into a different person. Nothing's changed, I said, stacking split wood in the corner, neat, 1 piece at a time. I just figured some things out. Figured what out? Figured out I can't keep living like this. I turned and looked at him. You're 24, not a kid. Earn your own money and spend your own money. Stop reaching for other people's. Learn to make it yourself. Red, then white, lips trembling around some insult that wouldn't come, because arguing with the new me was like punching a bale of cotton. Fine. Fine, second brother. You're really something. You just wait. He wheeled his bike around so fast the front tire caught the door sill and the canvas bag tumbled off. 2 packets of snacks and a bottle of liquor rolled out onto the ground. He'd come armed with gifts, planning to soften me up before the ask. Diplomacy first, force in reserve. Now he had to bend down and gather his own bribe off the dirt and leave without looking back. Feng Hua came out and watched him go, her face doing something complicated. Wei Dong, you've offended them badly. What happens later?
Later, I patted the sawdust off my hands. In the old days, we didn't offend anybody, and later never got any better anyway. She went quiet, because she knew I was right. Then came the summons. My father sent word. Everyone back to the old house Sunday. Family dinner. Been too long since we all sat down together. Nobody believed that for a second. The old house sat at the east end of the village. 3 mud brick rooms, an old jujube tree in the yard, a donkey tied under it. On paper, that donkey was the production team's, under my father's management. In practice, it was a family resource, which in my family meant everyone used it and I paid for the feed. When I got there with Feng Hua and the girls, 2 bicycles were already parked in the yard. My eldest brother's Forever, and the third brother's 28-inch. Inside, the eldest sister-in-law, Wang Lihua, was already at the stove helping my mother, and the smell coming out of that kitchen stopped me cold. Meat. Braised meat. In the old life, the old house never once called us over when they stewed meat. They'd invite the eldest brother's people, the third brother's people, and somehow the message to us always got lost. Today they'd called me,
which told me exactly how much they wanted something. My father sat in the good armchair with his enamel mug, "Labour is most glorious," printed on it in 5 red characters worn nearly to ghosts, and let his eyes rest on me a moment before sliding away. The air in that room was pulled tight as a string. My eldest brother rubbing his fingers, head down. The third brother smoking in the doorframe, his wife conveniently sent back to her parents so she couldn't be a witness. My fourth sister, Chen Chunhua, arrived with her sour, silent husband, Zhang Hongjun, and she came straight to us, crisp and warm, cooing over how big Weiwei had gotten, the only person in that house who looked glad to see me. In the old life, Chen Chunhua was the one who emptied her savings for me when I was dying. 20,000 yuan. I never got to spend it. I jumped instead. This life, I was going to make sure she never regretted standing near me. Then they laid out the food, and I saw the seating, and I understood the whole play. 8 immortals table, not enough chairs, and the one seat left over for us was a single stool by the door, right in the draft. My mother waved at it like it was nothing.
Wei Dong, you sit over there. Feng Hua's face fell, but she picked up the baby to go take the cold seat without a word, because that's what she'd been trained to do. I stood up, and I did the thing nobody at that table expected. I took hold of one end of the bench the third brother was sitting on and dragged it sideways. The bench tipped. Lin Guodong nearly went down on his backside, and the cigarette dropped out of his hand and burned a neat hole in his trouser leg. I ignored the yelp, hauled the bench to the middle of the table, added a chair, sat Feng Hua down in it, put Chen Xiaoling on my lap, and settled in next to my wife like the seat had always been ours. Squeeze in, there's room. I glanced around the table. Eat. You could have heard a pin drop into the braised pork. My father's mug hung halfway to his mouth. One of my mother's chopsticks hit the floor. My eldest brother's eyes were the size of teacups. Only Chen Chunhua, head down, was fighting a smile. My mother recovered first, face going long. Wei Dong, what are you doing? Moving perfectly good seats around? Our house is in a windy spot, Mom. My wife's health is poor. She can't sit. In a draft. I put a piece of braised pork in Feng Hua's bowl, then one in Chen Xiaoling's. Eat. Food's getting cold. Nobody at that table dared touch the pork first. Nobody except us. I kept lifting pieces, 3, 4 into Feng Hua's bowl, 2 into Ling's, while Feng Hua kicked me under the table to quit being so obvious, and I pretended not to feel it. Finally, the eldest sister-in-law couldn't stand it. Wei Dong, that's poor manners. Mom stewed that meat for everyone, and you're eating it all yourself. I didn't look up. Sister-in-law, you never once called us over when you ate meat before. We've had a few pieces and already you're grieving over it? She turned bright red and made no further contribution. Then my father set down his mug, and the room went silent, and he told us why we were really there. Your mother and I talked it over. It's time to divide the household. The family split. Those 2 words dropped into the room like a stone into a pond. My eldest brother and his wife traded a glance that said, finally, and tried to bury it. The third brother's hand clenched under the table, and I chewed a piece of potato and kept my face flat, because I already knew every line of what came next. In the old life, the split happened 6 months later, after I'd been bled dry, and I walked away with a strip of thin riverbank land and 2 crumbling mud brick rooms and a share of a donkey that everyone used but me. My eldest brother walked away with 3 brick houses and the best 5 mu of irrigated land. Fair? It was a robbery with a seating chart. And in the old life, I said nothing, because I thought arguing over things between brothers was beneath me, and I believed I'd earn it all back with my own 2 hands. What I earned, every fen of it, got borrowed and demanded and divided away until I had nothing left to divide but myself. Not this time. My father put on his wire-mended reading glasses and read out the plan, and it was word for word the one from the old life. Brick house to the eldest, he's married, he needs a nice house. Mud brick to the second's also got a family, but sorry, make do. Best land to the eldest, worst to the second. Bicycle and 200 yuan to the third. Sewing machine to the youngest sister as dowry. Donkey shared, feed shared, which everyone knew meant I fed a donkey I never got to ride. And savings, about 300 yuan, my father said. 300. In the old life, my mother told third aunt they had over 100,000 put away. That was 20 years on, sure, and this was 1980, when a household with 10,000 was a legend. But 300? My father had been the production team's accountant most of his life. Careful with money to the bone. Between his salary and the children's filial gifts and the crops and the 2 pigs in the pen, there was 2,000 or 3,000 in that house at least. I didn't rush to say so. Accounts get settled one at a time. Plays run scene by scene. Father, I said when he finished, dividing the household is fine, but it has to be fair. Every head turned. My father looked at me a long moment, this son who'd never once in his life competed for anything, always stepping back for the older and the younger, and here he was first to open his mouth and say the word, fair. The third brother sneered. Fair? Second brother, what's that supposed to mean? You think mom and dad would play favorites? I didn't say anyone plays favorites. I said a household division needs rules, so nobody takes more than his share and nobody eats a loss. I looked at my father. And I've got a few questions. He nodded. Go on. 1. My brother's brick house was built with the timber I brought back from the army. What was that timber worth? My eldest brother's face changed. 2. My third brother's wedding and furniture were paid out of my demobilization allowance. How's that getting counted? The third brother's cigarette hit the floor again. 3. Father, is it really true we've only got 300 saved? That one went off like a grenade. My mother slammed the table and shot to her feet, red in the face. You're calling your father a liar. You're saying your mother hides money. You've gone too far. I stayed calm. Mum, I didn't say anyone hides money. I asked how much the household has saved. When you divide a home, the accounts have to be clean. No fog. And then, from the end of the table, a crisp voice. Second brother's right. Chen Chunhua. You divide a household, you settle the accounts clear, or there's no explaining it later. Zhang Hongjun grabbed his wife's arm under the table. She shook him off and stuck her neck out. Am I wrong? Second brother's timber and money are real money. Why shouldn't they count? Eldest brother's house is built out of second brother's wood. Shouldn't he make that good? Third brother borrowed to get married. Shouldn't he pay it back? My mother's voice went to a knife's edge. Lin Chen Chunhua, a married-off daughter, what standing do you have to point fingers here? And the eldest sister-in-law piled on. Married daughter, water out of a cup. None of your business. Quit playing the saint. And the third brother sank the blade in with a smile. Jealous your own place is doing well, Chen Chunhua? Or you want a slice of the pie too? A married daughter coveting her parents' property. Aren't you afraid people will laugh? Chen Chunhua's eyes went red, and her voice failed her. I stood up. Slow, but there's a weight to slow. I looked at Zhang Hongjun first, and for reasons he couldn't have explained, his hand came off his wife's arm. Then I turned to my mother. Mom, I'm going to remember what you just said. What did I say? You said, what's wrong with family helping family? I repeated it soft and set each word down like a nail into the tabletop. So let me ask it too. If we're family, how come we're family when it's time for me to help, but strangers when it's time to divide? My timber built big brother's house, was that not helping? My money bought the third brother's bicycle and sewing machine, was that not helping? But come division day, my timber and my money turn into things I was willing to give, so they don't count. Fine. Then let me say it too. I was willing to give big brother that house. I'm also willing to take it back. Chen Weidong, how dare you? My eldest brother shot up, tall, half a head over me, a wall of a man. Big brother, I didn't give an inch. I'm not here to fight you. I'm here to get what's fair. My mother tried the tears. Your big brother's had it so hard, sick since he was a boy. What's wrong with helping him build a house? If his own brother won't help, who will? And the third brother's had it hard, just married, no livelihood. Mom, my voice came up.
And me? Have I had it easy? The room went still.
Came back from the army with a wrecked knee, can't do heavy work. A wife in poor health, 2 kids, 1 3 and 1 1. 2 mud brick rooms that let in the wind in winter and the rain in summer. Cornmeal porridge and pickled vegetable, and a daughter who can't get formula. It has not been easy for me. But I helped big brother. I helped third brother. I helped this whole family, timber, money, sweat, years. I held nothing back. And when we split, what do I get? 2 mud rooms and 4 mu of thin riverbank. Where's big brother? 3 brick houses and 5 mu of irrigated land. Mom, you said the family all helps each other. So tell me, who helps me? Feng Hua was crying into the baby's hair. Chen Chunhua shook off her husband, walked the length of the room, and came to stand beside me. Second brother's right. He gave the most to this family and got the least. That's not fair. My mother lost the last of it, pointing at Chen Chunhua's nose, screaming she was a good-for-nothing married-off traitor who always took outsiders' side, and I said her name once, low, the way you'd warn a leopard off. Mom, she flinched back into the table corner. Curse me all you want. Don't curse Chen Chunhua. She told the truth. If you can't hear it, that's your problem. But you don't get to insult her for it. And my mother, who'd never seen that look on me, no anger in it, no resentment, just a flat, cold line you don't cross, sat down and started to cry about the ungrateful children she'd raised. My father had said nothing this whole time. Sat in his chair, hands on his knees, head bowed, the wrinkles cut deep. Finally, he raised his head and looked at me and said, hoarse, almost inaudible, Wei Dong, what do you want? That was exactly the question I'd been waiting for. Father, I don't want more than mine. I only want what's mine. And I took a piece of paper out of my pocket. I'd written it out ahead of time, dense, line by line. 1. Big brother's house used my timber. Market value 150 yuan. He makes it good or offsets it. 2. 300 of my resettlement money paid the third brother's wedding. He pays it back. 3. You don't hand all the good land to the eldest and all the bad to me. We draw lots or split it even. Nobody gains, nobody loses. 4. I looked my father dead in the eye. The household savings are more than 300. You were the team accountant. You know better than I do. I won't name a number, but it's more than 300, and it gets divided. Equal shares among the 3 sons. Married daughters don't take a share. That's the village rule. I've no quarrel with it. But the sons split it even. 5. The donkey. If we can't divide it, we make a rule. Whoever uses it pays its feed. I don't use it least and pay most. I set the paper on the table. The room was dead silent. My eldest brother's face went a deep purple, fists cracking. The third brother went pale, then flushed, and didn't even notice the ash spilling down his pants. My mother sat with her mouth open like a fish washed onto the bank. Chen Chunhua snuck me a thumbs up, and Feng Hua, still crying, had the corners of her mouth turned up. Chen Weidong, my eldest brother finally growled, are you insane? I'm not insane. Point to the line that's unreasonable, big brother. You, his fingers shook at my nose. You ungrateful dog. You helped me because you wanted to. I never begged you. Now you drag it up to settle scores. Have you no shame? You're right. It was my choice. I helped you because I thought we were family, and family helps family, and it goes both ways. Now I understand. I help you, and you help yourself to me, and call it your due. I let the cold in. Let me ask you one more time, big brother. Who carried you out of that ravine? He froze. You said it yourself. You never begged me. Fine. The next time something happens to you, don't beg me either. You rushed me and got a fist in my collar and hauled me up, roaring at me to say it again. I didn't struggle. I didn't swing. I just looked into his eyes until the cold in mine reached him. You want to hit me, big brother? His fist went up. Enough! My father's hand came down on the table and the enamel mug bounced off and shattered on the floor, tea everywhere. He stood, trembling a little, but his voice was dead steady. Sit, all of you. My brother let go and dropped back onto his stool hard. My father bent down, slow, picked up the broken mug, set it on the table, and looked at me. Wei Dong, I've heard everything you said. My brother started to protest, and my father cut him off without even sharpening his voice, and my brother swallowed it like he'd been hit by lightning. Then my father put the wire glasses back on and read my paper, word by word, a long time, the wall clock ticking through the silence. Because whatever else he was, and he was a man who'd played favorites my whole life, he was an old-school farmer, stubborn, and fairness was cut into him somewhere deep. The old life divided the way it did because nobody objected. I said nothing then, so he went along with my mother.
This time it was in black and white, line by line, and he couldn't pretend not to see it. He set the paper down and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Wei Dong's got a point. My mother's eyes bulged. Old man, what did you say? I said Wei Dong's got a point. The timber's his. The money's his. It can't be used for nothing. And it's not fair to hand all the good land to the eldest and the bad to the second. My mother jumped up shrieking that he'd gone senile, that the good things should go to the capable sons, not to that good-for-nothing. And I said Mom once, quiet, and it stopped in her throat. Because for reasons she couldn't name, this son had become a stranger to her. Then my father turned to my brothers. Well? My eldest brother ground his jaw until the veins stood out on his temples. A man who lived on his reputation in that village, just made to eat crow by his little brother in front of the whole family. But he wasn't stupid. He knew, cornered, that what I'd said was airtight. The timber, he bit out. 150. I'll pay it. But I'm short on cash. Installments. 50 a year. Fine. He shot me a look full of resentment and something underneath it he didn't know was there. Fear. This brother was different now, and he'd felt it. Then the third brother, leaning in the doorframe, stubbed out what was probably his 10th cigarette. I'll pay back the 300, but I'm short right now. I'll pay when I've got it. No. Flat. Third brother, you just told me you found a job in town, 40-some a month. So you pay 20 a month. 15 months and it's clear. His face went dark. Second brother, you sure you want to take it this far? I'm your own brother. Third brother, like you said yourself, even brothers keep clean accounts. He glared, flung his hand, slammed the door, and left, the door bouncing off the wall and nearly catching his own heel on the way out. The land went by lot, drawn in front of my mother so nobody could cry fix. My eldest brother drew first and pulled 3 mu of dry land. The third drew 4 mu of the barren stuff and didn't care. He never meant to farm anyway. I drew last, and the 5 mu of irrigated land came to me. My eldest brother's face went to the bottom of a pot. His wife opened her mouth to protest, and I said, unhurried, Sister-in-law, the lots were father's rule. You draw what you draw. Or shall we redraw everything from the top? She shut it. She knew a redraw might cost them the dry land, too. Then the savings. My father was quiet a moment, then said it low, like a man setting down something heavy. 1,200 yuan. Not 300. 12. Team wages, the children's gifts, the 2 pigs sold from the pen. Split 4 ways, 300 to each of the 3 sons, and 300 kept back for him and my mother's old age, to be divided when they passed. I nodded. It was better than I'd hoped. And can I have my 300 today, father? My mother's head whipped around, eyes practically throwing sparks. Your father's not even dead yet, and you're this hungry to grab the money. And I said, calm, that Wei Wei's health was poor and needed nutrition, that I wanted formula for the baby and medicine for Fenghua to get her strength back. And there is nothing you can say to a man buying milk powder for his daughter and medicine for his wife. My mother trembled with fury and found no words. My father went into the inner room and came out with a thick stack, 10s, 5s, 2s, 1s, small notes and coins, and counted 300 in front of everyone. Count it, Wei Dong. I took it and put it straight in my pocket. No need. I trust Dad. Then I picked up Wei Wei in one arm, took Fenghua's hand in the other, and at the door I stopped and turned back. One more thing. Chen Chunhua spoke up for me today, and it made some people unhappy. If anyone gives her grief over it, you come tell. Me, anyone bullies my sister, I don't forgive it. And I walked out with my wife and my daughter, 300 honest yuan in my pocket, into the first evening of a life I was actually going to live. My mother made one more run at me a few days later, softer this time, the money borrowed dressed up as a chat. Now that I was doing a little business and had a little money, here she came. I let her finish and then asked her the only question that mattered. Mom, in your eyes, am I an ATM? You get short, you come find me, punch a few buttons, cash comes out? She had no answer to that either. She sat on the little stool a long while, looking at me like I was a patch of dirt she'd stepped on for years that had suddenly been fired into brick. Same dirt, but nobody's stepping on it now. Then she stood, patted her pants, and said in a dry little voice, Fine, you're grown. Mom can't manage you anymore. Which was, after 20 years, the closest thing to a victory speech I was ever going to get. I didn't gloat. I told her the truth. I'd give my parents every bit of filial care they were owed. Food, clothes, doctor's bills, whatever they actually needed, come to me. But bankrolling the eldest brother and the third brother was finished. They were grown men. Let them handle their own lives. That was the whole revolution, really. Not that I stopped loving my family, that I stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm.
Now I had a wife who believed in me, and 300 yuan and a wrecked house, and it was time to turn all three into something. I started with the roof, because you can't build a life in a house that rains on your children. 4 days, no hired help. Not because I was too proud, but because in that village, hiring a hand meant feeding him, and feeding him meant meat and wine. And by the time you'd done all that, you'd spent more than the labor was worth. So I did it myself. Stripped the tiles, tore out the rotten rafters, laid new ones, tar paper, tiles back down. My old army niece screamed the whole way up and down the ladder, and I told it to be quiet. Filled the wall cracks with lime, whitewashed inside and out, and then the part that took the longest, I bought 2 panes of real glass in town and rebuilt the windows myself with hinges and latches, carpentry I'd picked up in the service.
Last day, I relaid the kang mat and knocked together a little table and 2 little chairs out of the leftover boards. Feng Hua stood in the doorway of what was technically still 2 mud brick rooms and couldn't speak. White walls, glass windows, a new mat. A little table where our older girl put her hands flat on the smooth wood and looked up and asked if it was hers. Yes, yours and your sister's. Draw here, write here. And Chen Xiaoling clapped her hands and her 3-year-old eyes folded into little crescents. Then, 3 days after the house was done, I went back to town and came home with a load that made Feng Hua think I'd lost my mind. A sack of flour, a drum of oil, sugar, yeast, several slabs of pork belly, a flat iron pan, a spatula. Wei Dong, are you trying to bankrupt us? I sat her down on the kang and told her. I wanted to sell food. Rou jiamo, meat in a griddled flatbread outside the factory in town. I could cook. In the army, I'd learned, and I'd spent time as a kitchen hand, and, the part I couldn't say out loud, in the life I'd already lived, I'd stood 10 years next to a state restaurant master named Sun, who taught me chopping, heat, seasoning, everything, until he said the thing I never forgot. Wei Dong, your hands were made for dough. A meat bun cost under a dime to make and sold for 3. 50 a day was 10 yuan of profit. 10 yuan a day, when a year in the fields didn't clear 300. She was scared. Of course she was scared. She'd watched money vanish out of this house her whole marriage. But she looked at me, and something in her decided to bet on the new man. And she said, okay. 4:30 the next morning, the stars still out like scattered diamonds, I braised the meat that had simmered overnight until you could break it with a chopstick. Chopped it, baked 50 flatbreads dry in the pan until they wore golden freckles, stuffed and wrapped each one in oil paper, and stacked them in a wooden box I'd nailed together from house repair scraps and varnished so it wouldn't look like garbage. Then I walked the 40 minutes to town carrying breakfast for 300 strangers and my whole future in a box. The agricultural machinery factory had 300 workers and a canteen those workers hated, which is another way of saying it had 300 hungry men looking for a reason not to eat at the canteen. 2 stalls already worked the gate, an old man named Liu selling steamed buns, who gave me the wary once-over of a man watching a new dog enter his yard, and a round-faced woman with fried dough sticks and soy milk who could make conversation with a fence post. I set up out of everyone's way, opened the lid, and let the smell of overnight braised pork do the advertising. The fried dough woman drifted over. Can't accept this. Already reaching for the sample. Took 1 bite and lit up like a switch. Crispy bread, meat stewed to butter, better than the state restaurant. She told me flat out we wouldn't clash. You sell your buns, I'll sell mine. Decent woman. I've never forgotten her. Then I did the only clever thing I did all morning. I didn't shout. I opened the box wide so the smell carried, picked up 1 rougiamo on its square of oil paper, stood behind the box and shut up, planted dead opposite the factory gate, where every worker had to walk past my meat to get to their bad canteen. The first man stopped, sniffed, leaned in, bought one, chewed twice, stopped chewing, looked down at it like it had insulted his canteen personally, bought a second for lunch, and that was the whole business, because workers travel in packs. 1 man buys, the pack gets curious, the pack smells it, and 9 times out of 10 the pack buys. 50 rougiamo, gone in under an hour. When there were 4 left, men were still asking and I had to tell them, sorry, that's all, come back tomorrow. Which, it turns out, is the single best sentence a food seller can say. I squatted on the ground and counted 14 yuan, and my hand shook. Not because it was a lot of money, but because it was the first money I had ever earned that was mine. In a whole previous lifetime, I had worked for everyone and lived for no one. Never again.
On the way home, I turned into the co-op and bought flour, pork, sugar, a can of milk powder, a length of dark blue cloth for the coat Feng Hua didn't have, 2 red ribbons for Chen Xiaoling, and a cloth tiger for the baby. I walked home like the ground was made of cotton. Feng Hua was feeding the chickens in the yard. I walked up and put the wad of bills in her hand. She froze. "How much is this?" 14. 9 of it profit. Her hands started to shake, and she counted the coins 3 times before she'd let herself believe it. And then she ducked her head and pretended to keep counting so I wouldn't see her cry. I told her to stop crying. Making money's a good thing. She said she wasn't crying. She was happy. Then I opened the milk powder, mixed 2 spoons with warm water, and put the bowl to Lin Wei's mouth, 1 year old, who threw away her straw and grabbed the bowl with both hands and drank so fast it ran down her chin, and I wiped her face and said, "Drink slow. Nobody's taking it from you." And Feng Hua cried a great deal harder. That night, I cooked my family a real dinner. The first one I'd ever made them in 2 lifetimes. Proper braised pork in big, square, glistening chunks. Hand-pulled flatbread in translucent layers. Egg drop soup from our own 3 hens. Chen Xiaoling ate with her whole face and declared Dad's meat the best meat. And I sat there and understood, finally, the thing that had taken me. 46 years and the fall out a window to learn. Spending money on the people you love isn't waste. It's the entire point. Feng Hua asked to help. Not to wait at home, to stand next to me and work. I said no, it's too tiring. She held out her cracked, work-ruined hands and said them being clumsy didn't mean they couldn't knead dough, and that she didn't want to sit at home while I built our life. She wanted to build it with me. And under the kerosene lamp, her eyes had a light in them I'd never once seen in the old life. Not resentment, not endurance, not the flat patience of a woman waiting out her fate, but the stubborn will to stand shoulder to shoulder. So I taught her. Dough, meat, the flatbread, and she smiled with both dimples, the way she used to under the locust tree at the village gate at 21, before life wrung the smiling out of her. And I made myself a quiet promise to keep that smile on her face for the rest of it. The stall grew fast. 120 a day, the ceiling of what 2 people could make without cutting quality, and I never went over it. Braised eggs added to the pot, then braised tofu, kelp, peanuts, until a worker could get a whole comfortable lunch for 50 cents. And then I did the math and rented a shop. Getting it wasn't clean. The landlord was a director Ma, deputy something at the co-op, a short round man who sat in a big chair with his legs crossed and looked at me like I smelled. Snacks? Ha! This location did hundreds a month under the old grocer. You'll never make rent. And demanded 6 months up front, 180 yuan, knowing I'd balk. I had it. I just didn't want every fen tied up in rent with nothing left to work with. So I went home, asked around, learned 2 things. Director Ma took bribes, and Director Ma had a sick wife whose medicine ate his money. The next day, I came back with 10 rujiamo and a box of braised food and set it in front of him. He didn't want to eat it. The smell decided for him. 2 bites in his eyes changed, and I offered him 1 week's free delivery forever and 3 months rent now with the rest at renewal if business was good. And Director Ma, chewing my pork, allowed us how 3 months would do. 90 yuan, key in hand. I didn't beat him with power I didn't have. I beat him with a flatbread. I built out the shop myself where I could, and paid without flinching where I couldn't. Welded stove, 2 big iron pots, a red-painted board over the door with 4 characters Feng Hua brushed in her good hand for the carpenter to carve. Weidong Snacks. Feng Hua laughed that the name was too plain. I told her plain was the point. We were in the honesty business. An honest name fit. Opening day, I ran no firecrackers and hung no flower baskets. I just unlocked the door and let the smell out. And the factory workers who'd been eating my gate rujiemo for half a month walked over and filled 6 board and nail tables, and some stood at the door eating out of their bowls. By 1:30, I'd sold through most of 50 catties of flour, every last braised egg, and I covered the word rujiamo on the sign with a cloth. Sold out. Come back tomorrow. And turned people away with real regret on their faces, which is the sound a business makes when it's going to live. 57 yuan 80, 30 of it profit, in 1 day. Feng Hua counted it 3 times, hands shaking, and asked if it was too much, and I told her it was the first day and half of them came to gawk. Whether they came back was down to the cooking. And a man in blue overalls had eaten 2 rougiamo and a bowl of noodles on his way out, and said he'd worked that factory 8 years and never had noodles that good. They came back. The money did what money does when you finally point it at the right people. A navy cotton coat with a lambskin lining for Feng Hua, warm, 18 yuan. Rubber-soled cloth shoes, 6. A red padded jacket with a white rabbit on it for Chen Xiaoling, and little pigskin boots she ran through the shop in like a moving flame, hollering that she had new clothes. A pink wool pom-pom hat for the baby that made her look like a small mushroom. Nothing for me. My clothes still worked. No rush. Feng Hua turned in front of the mirror in her new coat and blushed, and asked if it looked nice. And it did. Honestly, it did. Because with the coat on, and the dullness of hard years lifting off her face, you could see she'd had good skin all along. Nobody had just ever let her keep it. Hadn't had a new padded coat in years, she said, voice catching. Every year from now on, I said. She turned away to fold clothes and cry, and I let her, and picked up the baby instead. Next door, Auntie Wang leaned out to note sourly that Wei Dong's family had struck it rich, buying the child such nice things. Not rich, Auntie, I told her before Feng Hua could shrink. Just a little easier. A kid needs 1 new outfit a year. And Auntie Wang pulled her head back in. Then came my father-in-law's 50th birthday, and the chance to pay back the one part of the world that had actually been decent to me. In the old life, I'd shown up to that party with 2 catties of pork and a bag of pastry, and set it on the table next to my 2 brothers-in-law's cigarettes and cloth and liquor, and not been able to lift my head. This life I brought 2 packs of Da Tianmen, 2 bottles of Yanghe Daku, honey, red dates, goji, brown sugar, not a lot of items, all of them good. My mother-in-law's eyes went wide and wet. My father-in-law, Li Guangfu, a man who'd worn out his life in the fields and rarely wasted a word, heard I was clearing 30 or 40 a day and just said, "Do it well. Don't let Feng Hua and the child suffer for you again." Don't worry, Dad. It won't happen again. The 2 brothers-in-law were exactly as I remembered them. Liu Fumin, commune accountant, glasses, woolen coat, leather shoes, legs crossed, radiating minor officialdom. Sun Donghai, co-op purchasing agent, loud as a loudspeaker, red sweater under his jacket because that was the fashion. They traded a look at my gifts, and Sun Donghai opened with the needle. Struck it rich, eh? This set's 50 or 60 yuan, and here you always used to bring 2 catties of pork. And then Liu Fumin, smooth. Heard you fell out with your family, fighting your brothers over the inheritance? That scrutinizing tone. How did an honest doormat suddenly grow teeth? I didn't take the bait, and I didn't grovel. Nobody taught me. I figured it out myself. I used to give in on everything, and my family paid the price. Now what's mine, I keep. And what isn't mine to pay, I don't. Sun Donghai's grin froze. Something shifted behind Liu Fumin's glasses. This wasn't the man who used to be afraid to breathe too loud in front of them. And then the real test walked in. The brother-in-law himself. Li Mingzhi, 20 years old, the Zhao family's only son and the family's ruin. Floral shirt, bell-bottoms, pointed shoes, hair parted 7'3" and lacquered, thin as a stick from staying up smoking and playing cards rather than from any honest hunger. He dropped down next to me, helped himself to a Da Tianmen off the table, blew a smoke ring, and told me that he'd seen a Red Lantern radio at the county store, 45 yuan, and I was buying it for him. Like I owed it. The room went cold. My father-in-law started up out of his chair and my mother-in-law held him down. In the old life, this was where I'd hesitate, sigh, and hand over money I didn't have while he complained it wasn't enough, and Feng Hua cried silently the whole way home and blamed it on a wind that wasn't blowing. This time I put my daughter off my lap, stood up, and asked him how old he was. 20. A grown man. And a grown man earns the money for what he wants. His smile fell off. What do you mean, third brother-in-law? I mean, I'm not buying you a radio, but I'll give you something better, a way to earn one. Come work at my shop. Room and board, 30 yuan a month. He wrinkled his nose. 30's too little. You make that in a day. And I cut him off. What I make in a day is my business. You'd be an employee earning a wage. Don't like it? Don't come. But if you want a radio, you'll buy it with your own hands. 30 a month, 60 in 2, more than enough. And then I gave him the hook that actually went in. You won't just haul plates. You'll learn a trade, dough,
braising, seasoning. Learn that, and one day you don't earn 30 a month, you earn 300, 3,000 in a shop of your own. His eyes lit and dimmed. I can't cook. Nobody's born cooking, I said. I wasn't either. I learned. His head stayed down over a cigarette burning down to his fingers, while a war went on behind his face. My father-in-law's eyes had gone red and grateful. My mother-in-law turned to the kitchen to wipe her face on the pretense of fetching a dish. And the two brothers-in-law, who'd walked in ready to look down their noses at me all night, sat there with the disdain draining out and something more complicated pouring in. Is this the same Chen Wei-dong?
Then I'll give it a try, Mingji said, the arrogance mostly gone out of his voice. Come Monday, I said, I'll teach you. Teaching him was its own slow miracle, and I'll be honest, most days it looked like watching a rooster try to do laundry. First day he showed up in his father's spare overalls, looking like a playboy who'd wandered into a kitchen by accident, wrinkled his nose at the steam, and coughed. I put him on washing and chopping vegetables. Too simple, he sniffed, until I showed him the mud still packed at the base of a spinach stalk and told him that if he fooled a customer with a gritty vegetable today, he'd fool them with a bad piece of meat tomorrow. And customers who got a bad meal simply never came back, and repeat customers were the entire business. He held the cleaver like an axe and produced potato shreds that ranged from chopstick thick to toothpick thin, with some pieces not cut at all, and I stood behind him and put his fingers right, thumb and forefinger on the blade, wrist, not arm, the way you'd teach a child, and he flushed, not from shame, but because a grown man was holding his hand to teach him to slice a potato, and it made him feel 3 years old. He kneaded dough too wet and slammed it down cursing, and I sprinkled in dry flour and showed him again. Too much flour, add water. Too much water, add flour. It's not a crisis. At lunch rush, he took a stack of bowls to the back, slipped on a wet patch and smashed 3 on the floor, and the whole shop looked over, and he stood there paralyzed, waiting to be screamed at the way every boss he'd ever quit on had screamed at him. And I looked out from behind the stove and said, "It's fine. Broken porcelain brings good luck. Sweep it up. Mind your feet." That was all. And it undid him more than any beating would have. Because here's what nobody had ever done for Li Mingji. Nobody had ever let him fail without contempt, or caught him doing something right and said so. At home, everything he did was wrong. Lazy to his father, idle to his mother, hopeless to his sisters. So somewhere along the way, he'd stopped doing anything at all, since doing it was wrong anyway. In my shop, he didn't get cursed for a mistake, and he did get told, at exactly the right moment, that the potato shreds were more even than yesterday, that a customer had praised his service by name, that the bowls came out spotless. And every time his ears went red and he muttered, "What's the big deal?" and the corners of his mouth went up. A week in, he'd stopped going through the motions and started hunting for work, wiping tables unbidden, greeting guests, drying bowls and stacking them neat. The difference between a young man going the right way and the wrong way, I was learning, is sometimes just one person willing to put a hand under his elbow. By the new year, he was a different creature. Gave his own mother 10 yuan out of his own wages, and she cried half the night. At the spring festival table, his brothers-in-law raised their cups to me, Liu Fumin, who used to look through me, saying Mingzhi was a new man, and he'd remember the kindness. Sun Donghai, booming that he'd always figured me for a coward with no ambition, and now saw I was just a man who hadn't figured it out yet, which, in his mouth, was a toast. And the whole valley's opinion of me turned over like a field in spring. The same relatives who'd greeted me for years with that, "This family's poor, keep your distance," look, now met me at their doors with Weidong's, "Here, sit, have some tea," warm enough to make me itch. Feng Huan noticed it on the back of the bicycle riding home, and I asked her if saying it out loud stung, and she said no. Just relief. They looked down on us when we were poor and easy to push. Now they don't dare. Which was true, and ugly, and I let it be both. Somewhere in there, a man named Wu Chang opened Wang Family Snacks directly across the street, and I waited to feel something about it and never did. He'd cooked years in a state restaurant. He had real hands, and when he tried to beat me at Rojiamo, he lost, so, and this is the part I respected, he didn't sulk and he didn't sabotage. He simply stopped making what he couldn't win and switched to griddle cakes and fried noodles I didn't sell, priced them fair, portioned them generous, and carved out an honest living off the overflow. Mingzhi figured Wu Qiang had basically admitted he was beaten. I told him it wasn't defeat, it was brains. A man who knows what he can't do and changes direction isn't stupid. He's dangerous in the good way. The two shops sat across one street and never once fought, each doing its own trade,
and it stayed that way, and that was fine by me. There are only so many hungry people in a town. You don't have to eat them all. Life, in other words, had become good. A wife who laughed, 2 daughters in new coats, a shop with a line at noon and regulars who'd come back the next day rather than eat anywhere else. A forever bicycle, cigarettes and liquor for my father-in-law, a father-in-law who patted my shoulder and called me son like he meant it. And then my father sent word to come back to the old house. My youngest sister Chun-Li was getting married. It was time, my mother said, to discuss the dowry. I knew that word, dowry, and I knew who Chun-Li was marrying, and I knew exactly what he was going to do to her arms and her front teeth and the child she'd be carrying inside of a year. And I knew, riding back through that cutting January wind, that this was the one fight where doing the right thing was going to make me look like the villain, and that I was going to do it anyway.
The old house was packed. My father with his enamel mug, my mother in a brand new navy-padded coat with a smile she had to keep forcing back onto her face when she saw me. My eldest brother, head down, rubbing his fingers, his wife stone-faced beside him. The third brother smoking in the doorframe, his wife knitting in the corner with the expression of a woman who'd rather be anywhere. And on the edge of the kang, my sister Chun-Li, 19, in a new pink coat, red ribbons in her braids, lipstick on, head down over a handkerchief, wearing the shy, happy smile of a girl who believes she's about to marry up into a good life. She had no idea the man she was smiling about would, inside a year, knock out one of her front teeth, break her arm 3 separate times, and beat her until she lost the baby. I knew all of it, and I couldn't say a single word of it, because there's no proof for a future only you have lived. My mother ran the meeting. Weddings the 8th of the 2nd month, fortune teller's auspicious day. Guo Liang's people are town people, father a factory director, mother in the sub-district office, 5 big brick houses, very well off. Chun-Li marries in, she becomes a town resident, subsidized grain, never has to touch a field again. A blessing for Chun-Li, a blessing for the whole Lin family, her voice climbing with every sentence. And then the pivot, smooth as ever, her eyes landing on me last of all the sons. The furniture has to be a full set, wardrobe, desk, chair, nightstand, vanity, and Wei Dong, you'll pay for the timber and the making. Every head turned to me, right on schedule. I put down my water bowl. Mom, one question first. What are big brother and third brother giving Chun-Li? She hadn't expected that. She stammered. They're not well off, you know their situation. So the ones without money don't pay, I said, flat, each word a nail. Is that the rule, Mom? My eldest brother's head came up, glaring. What do you mean, Chen Wei-dong? I didn't blink. I just want to know clearly what each of us is putting in, and then I'll decide what I put in. The eldest sister-in-law shrilled that I'd made a little money, and now I was sowing discord. Chun-Li's everyone's sister. Everyone contributes what they should. Why do you care what anyone else gives? Because, sister-in-law, I care very much what everyone else gives. So say it out loud. Big brother. Third brother. In front of mom and dad, what exactly are you giving your sister? That was the trap, and it was a clean one, because it forced the misers to weigh themselves on their own scale. My eldest brother's face went liver dark, and he ground it out through his teeth after a full half-minute. A bedsheet? A kettle? 10 yuan. His wife tugged his sleeve to stop him from admitting even that. The third brother, unable to keep playing mute once the eldest had spoken, muttered his own. An enamel basin, a pair of pillowcases, 8 yuan. His wife's knitting needles picked up speed like she was stabbing something. And my mother sat there listening to those 2 tiny numbers with her face cycling through disappointment and helplessness, and, underneath it, a resignation that said she'd always known those 2 would give nothing, which was exactly why she'd built the whole plan on squeezing me. She turned to me, expectant. Now it's your turn. I picked up the bowl, took another sip of water, set it down. Mom, I don't agree to this marriage. I won't be providing the furniture. The room came apart. My mother was on her feet screaming at me to say it again, and I said it again, steady, no volume. If Chun-Li were marrying a good man, I'd send her off gladly. But Guo Liang has a rotten name in that town, I've told you before, and she'll suffer for it, and the day that furniture's built is the day it becomes the Wang family's furniture. My mother trembled and pointed at my nose. You're just cheap. You made a little money and you won't even furnish your own sister's dowry. What kind of brother is that? And I stood up and let her have the truth she liked least. It's not that I won't spend the money. It's that I know Guo Liang better than you do, and inside a year this marriage breaks, and if we can't get the furniture back, the money's simply gone. And Chun-Li shot up off the kang, red-faced, tears already coming, and threw the knife herself. How dare you curse me? You just can't stand to see me do well. You're jealous I'm marrying a town man, someone better than you. I used to think you were good to me. Now I see you're selfish. Selfish. That word went in under the ribs and stayed there. But I didn't flinch and I didn't explain, because there was no explanation that anyone in that room would believe. I just stood and looked at my 19-year-old sister in her pink coat and her wedding lipstick, so sure her whole good life was about to start, and I let her call me selfish, because the alternative was to leave her alone with people who'd sell her to it. Chun-Li, I said, and softened only enough to be heard. Your second brother isn't refusing because he doesn't care. He's refusing because he's worried about you. She covered her ears. She wouldn't hear it. Some people, 1,000 words from you are worth less than one hard fall, and Chun-Li was going to have to take the fall. I held my line and drew the only fair rule there was. If furniture gets made, the 3 brothers split it in equal thirds. I'll give exactly what big brother gives and exactly what third brother gives. No more, no less. Which of course meant no furniture at all, because those 2 would sooner eat the cleaver than pay a third. The eldest sister-in-law screeched about being bullied, and I told her plainly, nobody's bullying you. Bedsheet's a bedsheet, furniture's furniture, and if you won't pay for furniture, then don't send Mom to my shop to ask me to. And here is the thing I hadn't let myself expect. My father, who'd sat through the whole thing with his head down, brought his hand down on the table hard enough to make the teacup jump, stood up, and, trembling a little, said the furniture question could wait. But Chun-Li was getting married, and the dowry she was owed would not be short. And if the 3 sons couldn't sort it out, then he'd pay it himself. My mother yelped, "With what money, old man?" And my father roared back 4 words that shut the whole room. "I'm not dead yet." Then he sat, hand shaking so the tea slopped over the rim onto the table, and I looked at that shaking old hand and felt something I hadn't planned on feeling. Because whatever else my father was, biased, muddled, a man who'd spent my whole childhood handing the good things to my brothers, he'd raised 5 children and never once had a good day of his own. And he wasn't wicked. He was just old and tired, and still, at the very end of his rope, reaching for fair. "Father," I said, and let the fight drain out of my voice, "I won't furnish this marriage, but every fen I actually owe, I'll pay. 2 quilts and 10 yuan, gift money. That's mine." My mother's lips worked. My father silenced her with a look. And Chun-Li sat on the Kong with the tears drying on her face, staring at me with a hurt she couldn't name, unable to understand why the brother who'd always protected her wouldn't protect her now, not knowing that refusing to protect her the way she wanted was the only real protection I had left to give. I stood at the door on my way out. "I'll come the day Chun-Li marries. 2 quilts, 10 yuan, not a fen less." And I left, my mother's curses and Chun-Li's crying and the sister-in-law's shrieking braiding together behind me, and I didn't turn around. Half a mile down the road I stopped, propped the bike, squatted on the edge of a field, and smoked a cigarette with a hand that wasn't quite steady. Because I could afford the furniture. 100 yuan, easy. What I couldn't afford was what furnishing it would say, that her second brother blessed the match, that the Lin family was pleased, that the Wang family had our seal on the thing. I wasn't pleased. I knew how it ended. In the old life, I'd built her the whole set and given 30 yuan and been glad for her, and then stood in a police station all night after I kicked in Guo Liang's door and knocked out his teeth for what he'd done to her, while Feng Hua and my daughters cried in the cold outside. She'd called me selfish. If I were selfish, I'd have handed over the money, kept the peace, kept her love, and let her walk into the fire smiling. Being called selfish for pulling someone back from a ledge is just the toll you pay for the pulling. I finished the cigarette, burned my fingers on the end of it, and rode back to my shop, where my wife handed me a bowl of noodles without a word, and after I'd told her, said the only 4 words I needed. "You did the right thing." And the fire in my chest banked down to something I could live beside. I couldn't save Chun-Li yet. She hadn't reached out, and you can't pull a person who won't put out a hand. But I hadn't lived a whole extra life just to stand around being right and losing anyway. If I couldn't stop the marriage, I could stack the board for the fight I knew was coming. And the fight was coming in the shape of a man named Guo Liang, whose family owned that town, and who in the old life had beaten my sister half to death and settled the whole thing for 1,000 yuan, because the honest cop who'd have jailed him had been transferred out and a bought one put in. So when the honest cop landed in front of me by pure chance, I did not let chance stay chance. It was an ordinary bright day, snow melting into the gutters, the shop packed. Then, screaming outside, a woman, mid-40s, hair wild, a kitchen cleaver up over her head, already blood on the blade, an old man down in the street with his arm laid open to the bone. the whole street had turned to statues. Her name, I'd learn, was Wang Xu, and she was out of her mind, genuinely, medically, and she'd been that way a long time, and right now she was going to kill someone. I went out. I told Ming Zhi to keep the shutter half down and stay inside, and I walked toward her with my hands open, telling her I was there to help, put the knife down.
She looked at me the way you'd look at a fence post. No expression, no person home behind the eyes. And then she came. Fast. Faster than a woman her age should move. The cleaver drawing a bright arc down at my head. I didn't back off. I slipped to the side, felt the blade shave a strip of cotton off my sleeve, and caught the wrist. She was far stronger than she looked, clawing at my face with her free hand, nails opening 3 lines down my neck. But the body remembers deeper than the brain. Army grappling. Once it starts, it runs itself. I forced the knife wrist down, came up under her elbow with my other hand and cranked the joint, put my foot between hers and dropped her. We went down together and I pinned her and pried the cleaver out of her fingers one at a time, her knee cracking into my ribs the whole way, until it hit the ground with a clang. 2 men finally broke out of the frozen street to help hold her. Someone threw a coil of hemp rope, and it took all 3 of us to bind one thin madwoman. Then I picked up the cleaver, set it blade inward on a stone where no one could reach it, and stood up. Sleeve cut open, cotton showing, neck burning, fingertips coming away red. A rib that ached when I breathed. And I couldn't have cared less about any of it, because I'd just done the most useful thing of my second life, and it hadn't even started yet. The man who came running with a police holster swinging turned out to be the woman's husband, and the man I'd crossed 2 lifetimes to reach. Deputy Director Sun Hao. Square face, straight back, a soldier's spine under the uniform. He knelt by his wife, and his face fell apart. And then he stood up and asked the street, horse, who subdued her? They pointed at me. He walked over, looked me up and down, the cut sleeve, the bloody neck, and put out his hand. Brother, thank you. A veteran? Yes, 75 to 80. He nodded slowly and said the sentence I'd come for without either of us knowing I'd come for it. Sun Hao doesn't forget a kindness like this. Because here's what I knew that he didn't. In the old life, this exact day got Sun Hao suspended and then transferred out, not for anything his wife did, but because a station chief whose family member had a public breakdown was an embarrassment to be cleaned up. A good man lost his post, a good cop left his beat, and the bad people of that town got braver the day he was gone. Guo Liang's family got braver too. That's how my sister's shattered arm and lost child ended up worth exactly 1,000 yuan. But what if Sun Hao stayed? What if the honest cop was still the chief when the Wang family reached for my sister? Would they dare? I didn't have the answer. But I knew standing in that bloody street, watching them cart the madwoman off to a hospital that would actually keep her, that I'd just changed the shape of the board. That a man like Sun Hao, who pays his debts, was a far better thing to have in my corner than any furniture I could have bought. He came to the shop the next day in full uniform, sat at my stove, and insisted on paying for 2 rou jiamo, a bowl of sauerkraut and pork noodles, and a plate of braised meat, 1 yuan 30, because a man who eats free is a man who owns you, and Sun Hao didn't intend to owe or be owed, he intended to be square. He looked 5 years older than the day before. His superiors were going to suspend him or transfer him, still undecided. But he told me, low, so only I could hear, as long as he wore the badge, that town would not slide into chaos. Good people wouldn't be wronged. Bad people wouldn't get away with it. That's the whole job. And I looked at this straight-backed, red-eyed, exhausted, honest man and told him the truest thing I had. Director Liu, I trust you. He nodded, put his hat on, and at the door he turned back. Anything you ever need, come to me. Good, I said, and I meant to. He came back a few days later out of uniform, worn dark blue jacket, grey felt hat, a farmer to look at him, and this time he stayed to drink. The discipline had come down. A party warning, a demerit, apologise to the injured and cover the medical bills. He tossed it back like it was bitter, wry about it. Never been disciplined in his whole life, and now, old as he was, he'd earned his first. I told him the punishment was for the organisation to look at. The town knew what kind of man he was. And something in his face let go. Because a man who'd spent years caring for a sick wife while the whole town whispered had heard plenty of pity and plenty of gossip, and almost nobody just say it plain. We got to talking army. He'd been a platoon leader down south, 100 Li training marches, a dozen blisters on his feet, and gritted his teeth and didn't fall out. I told him about border defence up in the northeast, 4 hours standing guard at 30 below in a greatcoat, legs so stiff at the shift change your buddies had to walk you back in. 3 drinks in, we were calling each other brother. Mingzhe, ferrying dishes past us, noticed his third brother-in-law was talking more than he'd ever heard him talk, with a light in his eye he'd never seen. Fenghua noticed it too from behind the counter. She knew I'd done 5 years in the army, and I almost never spoke of it, and she'd never asked. And watching me now, she understood she maybe didn't know her own husband all the way down. When Sun Hao left, he set a slip of paper on the table, his office phone, his home address, anything, ever. And I folded it into my pocket, where it would sit like a card I hadn't played, against the day I could see coming that he couldn't. Mingzhe leaned in after, all conspiracy. Third brother-in-law, you and Director Liu are awful tight. Good to have if somebody ever leans on our shop, eh? I glared him back down.
People leans on our shop. Doing the work well and treating the customers right matters more than any friend with a badge. He pulled his neck in and shut up. But I kept the paper. February the 8th, my sister Chun-Li got married. I closed the shop, red paper on the door, closed one day for a family happy occasion. And Mingzi took the day, and Fenghua was up before dawn braiding Chen Xiaoling's hair with the new red ribbons and setting the pink pom-pom hat on the baby until the two of them looked like children off a New Year's poster. I put on the multi-soled cloth shoes Fenghua had made me, and I carried what I'd said I'd carry. 2 quilts and 10 yuan, wrapped in red, not a fen more. The old house yard was already loud with it. My mother in bright red, working the neighbors like a woman selling tickets. Chun-Li's marrying into the town. The son-in-law's family has 5 big brick houses in town, wanting the whole world to know her daughter had married up. In the corner sat a full set of furniture bound in red ribbon and pine. Branches, wardrobe, vanity, desk, table and chairs. The dowry my parents had paid for themselves, in the end, because the 3 sons wouldn't, and the Wang family had sent 288 yuan in betrothal money, so a bare send-off would have shamed them. My mother's eyes found my 2 quilts and pinched. Just that. And you dare bring it out? And slid back to a smile. Then Chun-Li came out of the inner room, and for a second, I didn't know her. Red wedding dress fitted at the waist, gold thread at the collar and cuffs catching the light, hair up with silver pins, gold earrings from the Wang betrothal, her face made up into a town bride's face, and under all of it, my little sister, who used to wait for me at the village gate at 15 with a bowl of cold tea. Second brother, you must be thirsty, drink. She came over and called me second brother in a voice that shook, and her eyes went to the 2 quilts and the little red packet, and her face did something that wasn't quite disappointment and wasn't quite spite. Is this all you're giving me? So soft only I heard it. As agreed, I said. 2 quilts, 10 yuan. Chun-Li, your second brother doesn't owe you anything. Her eyes reddened and she turned and walked away, and Fenghua beside me let out a small breath and squeezed my hand. At 10, the wedding party came clanging up the street. Guo Liang on a brand new Phoenix with a red flower on the handlebars, 7 or 8 bicycles of his friends behind, bells and ribbons, a whole spectacle. He swung off, straightened his collar, and strode in wearing a blue Chongshan suit and mirror-shined shoes, smiling. But it wasn't an honest man's smile. It was the smile of a hunter who's finally got the animal he's been tracking. "Where's my wife?" he shouted at the whole yard, and Chun-Li came to him red-faced and shy, and put her hand in his, and he grinned at the crowd and called my parents Dad and Mom, and took her out to the bicycle and helped her onto the back. I stood at the very back of it, the baby in one arm and Fenghua's hand in the other, and watched them wheel my sister away with her dowry. The party rolled off down the village road, 7 bicycles in a jingling line kicking up dust, kids running after shouting, "Bride! Bride!" Somebody setting off a string of firecrackers by the ditch. Her red dress burned bright in the sun like a moving flame, and then it was a red dot, and then it was gone. And the smoke cleared, and the road was empty but for tire tracks and torn firecracker paper. I stood there a long time, because in my head I was watching the other version. Chun-Li beaten bloody inside a year, 1 front tooth gone, an arm broken 3 separate times, a lost child. And every muscle in me wanted to run down that road, haul Guo Liang off the bicycle by his collar, and tell him that if he laid 1 finger on my sister, I would end him. And I didn't. Because it wouldn't work. Guo Liang wouldn't hear it. Chun-Li wouldn't thank me for it. The whole family would just say the second brother had gone crazy again,
couldn't stand to see his sister happy. On the one day she thought her good life was starting, I wasn't going to be the man who set fire to it and made her hate me forever. I'd said everything there was to say. The warnings were on the record. The rest of the road was hers, the one she'd chosen, and I couldn't walk it for her. Then a warm hand found mine.
Fenghua, not looking at me, looking down the empty road where the red had gone, but her hand said the thing she didn't. I'm here. I'm right beside you. Always. And the fist in my chest loosened a notch. Let's go home, I said. And Chen Xiaoling looked up and asked if she could go visit Auntie sometime. And I said yes. Dad will take you. And meant it, because whatever came, I wasn't going to let Chun-Li be alone at the bottom of it. Trouble found my own door soon enough, and this time it was 3 years old. Fenghua was hanging wash in the yard when Chen Xiaoling started crying at the gate. Not a tantrum cry, a hurt cry. And she found our girl sitting in the dirt, red ribbon knocked loose, a scrape bleeding on her knee. Between sobs it came out.
Tiedan and Erhua took my candy and pushed me.
Tiedan, my eldest brother's boy, 8 years old, the village's little emperor, and Erhua, his 6-year-old sister, who between them had been shoving Chen Xiaoling around for as long as she'd been walking. The candy was white rabbit creams I'd hauled back from the county. Half a pound Fenghua rationed out 2 pieces a day, and our girl had saved hers up rather than eat it, and an 8-year-old had taken it off a 3-year-old and put her on the ground for it. Fenghua cleaned the knee and swallowed her fury, because in the old life there was nowhere to put it. In the old life, I'd have said the words she was bracing for. Never mind, they're only children. Don't damage the relationship. And then fished a few more candies out of the cabinet and had her carry them over to the very kids who'd robbed our daughter. She'd choked on that for years. She waited to see which man was going to come home. I came home, took one look at her face, coaxed the story out of Chen Xiaoling, saw the mercurochrome on the little knee, and I sat down on the floor and put my daughter's shoes back on her feet and stood up. Fenghua asked where I was going. To my brother's house. To teach those two a lesson, make them apologize, and make their parents mind their own children. And a wave of pure relief went over my wife's face, because the man who came home was the new one. I didn't knock. I pushed my brother's door open onto the whole family parked in front of their 14-inch black and white, the TV half the village came to watch, and I walked past all of it straight to the 2 kids and stood over them. Did you take Xiaoling's candy today? Did you push her down? 2 faces went white. Tiedan, the little emperor who threw his weight around the whole village, shrank back on his stool and couldn't find his voice. My sister-in-law was up off her shoe soles in a second, coming into my house at night shouting at my children, "Have you no shame?" And I turned to her, flat. I'm not shouting, I'm asking. Kids fight, it's normal. Why make a mountain of it? Is snatching fighting? Is shoving a child to the ground fighting? Your Tiedan is 8. He took candy off a 3-year-old and put her knee open on the ground. Shouldn't her father come and get her justice? She choked on it. My brother tried the weary big man line. Do you really have to blow up a children's thing this big? I looked at him. First, Tiedan and Erhua apologized to Xiaoling. Second, you and your wife keep your children in hand and they never bully her again. Are you giving me orders, Chen Weidong? Not an order, a requirement. And if you think it's too much, we can walk over to father's right now and let him rule on it. An 8-year-old robbing a 3-year-old and knocking her down. Whose fault is that? The veins stood out on his temple, and he ground it out. Erhua, apologize to your second uncle. The little girl whispered, sorry. Tiedan glared at me with a hate too big for 8 years old and finally, through his teeth, said it too. And then I crouched to the boy's eye level and gave him the only thing that would stick. Tiedan, Xiaoling is your little sister. You're the older one. You protect her, you don't rob her. If I hear you've bullied her again, your second uncle won't come to reason with you next time. I didn't say what I'd do instead. He read it off my face fine. He wasn't joking, and the boy knew it. I walked home under a flat white moon and picked up my daughter and told her Tiedan and Erhua had said they were sorry, and if they ever did it again, she was to tell Dad. She wrapped her arms around my neck and nodded, and Fenghua, watching from the side, had that warmth come up in her again, because in the old life this was exactly the kind of small daily wrong that used to prove her man was no shelter at all. And now she knew, all the way down, that he was. Adults, children, anybody. Nobody got to push her babies around anymore. "You weren't like this before," she said in the dark. "I used to be stupid," I told her. "I'm not stupid anymore." She laughed into my shoulder and slept. And I lay awake a while, because the small fights were easy now, and the big one, the one wearing a blue suit and mirror-shined shoes, riding my sister off down a dusty road, was still out there, coming on slow. She came around once, before it went bad. A busy noon at the shop, and in walked Chun-Li in a camel wool coat and pointed leather shoes, hair permed loose over her shoulders, red lipstick, a whole different creature from the village girl, stylish and fashionable, and a little bit strange to me. Guo Liang behind her in a navy wool coat, hair lacquered, sweeping the packed little room with a smile that was all appraisal and all contempt. "Second brother, business is good," he said, and I said it was all right, flat, from behind the stove.
Chun-Li sat and admired the place out loud in that voice people use when they're really telling you how small it is. "So clean, second sister-in-law. Only, it's a bit cramped, isn't it? Look, you can barely turn around." Feng Hua just smiled. I made them rojamo and sauerkraut noodles and a plate of sliced braised meat, and Chun-Li took one bite and lit up despite herself. "Second brother, your cooking really is good." Because whatever the town had done to her clothes, it hadn't touched her memory of what her brother's hands could do. Guo Liang crossed his legs and smoked my air, and I cooked and said little. And I catalogued him the way you catalog weather that's going to turn. Then they paid and left, and I went back to the pot. And then the thing that mattered more than any of them. Feng Hua was pregnant again. You have to understand what that word cost in the other life. In the old life, this same child came and then went, because my mother worked her through the pregnancy, laundry and cooking and hauling in the fields, and Feng Hua didn't dare refuse. And one day the bleeding started and the baby was gone. And after that, she never carried again. Baren, in a village that had a word for it. My mother called her a hen that won't lay. My sisters-in-law had their own quieter versions. Even the village women said it. Chen Weidong's wife can't give him a son, and Feng Hua never said a word in front of anyone. But I knew it ate her from the inside. Knew her eyes went dim every time she watched some other woman's boy run past. She wasn't jealous. She was ashamed. Of a debt she thought she owed the Lin family and couldn't pay. Not this life. The morning the town health center handed back the slip with pregnancy reaction positive on the bottom line. 6 weeks, everything normal. Dr. Chen smiling, telling us to eat eggs and lean meat and pork liver and rest the first 3 months. Deng Hua held that paper and folded it small and carried it in her hand the whole way home, like it might blow away. And I made my rules on the spot. She was off. Off the shop, off the fields, off everything but resting and growing that child. She fought it. Whose wife doesn't work? There are pregnant women hoeing rows out there right now. And I cut her off. Your job now is to carry this baby safe. That's all. I'll run the shop with Mingji and I'll do the fields myself. She cried into my chest, "You're too good to me." And I told her the only sane thing. "You're my wife. If I don't treat you well, who am I saving it for?" Then I fed her like it was a second job. Chicken soup one day, braised pork liver the next, steamed fish the day after, 2 eggs minimum, milk powder morning and night. She said I was fattening her like a pig. I said even a pig didn't eat as well as she did. When the cooking smoke turned her stomach and sent her heaving under the jujube tree, I went and bought a little electric fan and set it by the stove to push the smoke out the window. And when she said I was throwing money away, I gave her the line I lived by now. Money's a bastard. Spend it and go earn it back. Her comfort was not the thing to economize on. Her comfort was the thing I'd been economizing on for 2 lifetimes, and I was done. The vultures smelled money and came circling, of course. First, my eldest sister-in-law, Wang Lihua, who materialized in our yard one afternoon wearing the exact "I need a favor" smile she'd learned from my mother. "Congratulations on the pregnancy, sister, and well, since you can't work the shop anymore, why doesn't she come help out? Washing, chopping, greeting guests. Just pay her 40 yuan a month." 40. Mingjie earned 30 and knew the whole trade. She wanted 10 more to learn it. Feng Hua, no fool, said she couldn't decide that and I'd have to be asked, which was the polite way of saying no. When I heard it, I put my chopsticks down and said no, without a comma of hesitation. We all knew Wang Lihua. Sticky fingers and sticky mouth. She'd pocket 2 slices of meat today, a few eggs tomorrow, a ladle of braising broth the day after, and then I'd have to choose between catching her and keeping the peace, and either way I lost. Better to shut the door now than break the dishes later. And there was the other thing. She didn't want a job. She wanted a free apprenticeship, a month in my shop skimming wages, eating on me, learning the braise, so she could open her own stall and skip the tuition I'd paid in blood over 10 years next to Old Master Sun. I wasn't going to fund the competition that robbed me while it did it. So I didn't wait for her to come back for the answer. I went to the source. Caught my eldest brother at the village mouth on his way to the quarry at 7 in the morning. Got off my bike and told him straight. My sister-in-law came asking to work the shop. The shop doesn't need anyone. Mingzi's enough. Tell her to let it go. His face went dark. What? She offered to help out of kindness and you're not even grateful. Brother, helping and hiring are 2 different things, I said. She's not offering to help. She's asking for a wage. 40 a month. 10 more than Mingzi, who can already do everything she can't. He was red to the ears, jabbing a finger. You just look down on your sister-in-law. You'll see. And I let him storm off, because I didn't care what he thought, and I cared even less what she thought. I'd stopped being the man you could work like a mule, and stopped being the man you could shame into it. Push me, and I push back. Corner me, and I turn. My mother, watching all this from the old house, decided she wanted her turn. Late March, she was airing quilts, stepped in a puddle, and went down. A bruised knee, a twisted wrist, a limp. Not much. But her mouth was never idle, and the next day word came to Fenghua. I fell. I can't move. Second son's wife. Come take care of me for a few days. And I watched my pregnant wife sit frozen with a feeding spoon in the air, because she knew the trap. Refuse, and my mother, who already called her spoiled and lazy and unfilial, would poison the whole family against her for years. Go, and it meant cooking, laundry, hauling, cleaning up after a woman who exaggerated a limp into a deathbed at exactly the 10-week mark Dr. Chen had told her not to strain. In the old life she'd gone, pregnant, and served, and strained, and bled, and lost the baby. And my mother's verdict on that was that she'd been delicate, playing sick over a little pregnancy. No, I said. Fenghua looked up. You're pregnant, I said. You don't go nurse anybody. Serving mother is the duty of 3 daughters-in-law, not 1. Big brother has a wife. Third brother has a wife. Why do you go alone? But Mum asked for me specifically. So because she pointed at you, you go? Fenghua, if you work yourself sick, who pays for it? Can mother? Can big brother? Can the third?
She went quiet. And then I told her the part she didn't see coming. I'm going to the old house tomorrow. On your turn, I serve her. She stared at me. You'll serve her? What? I'm not good enough. I'm her son. Serving her is my duty. You're pregnant. It's not convenient. I go in your place, and nobody in that family can say one word about it. Her eyes went red, and she bent over the baby's clothes so I wouldn't see, and I let her, and picked up Lin Wei and flew her over my head until she shrieked, Dad! And I answered loud and kissed her, because that was the sound I'd crossed a lifetime to hear. The next morning I didn't open the shop. I left it to Mingzhi, and I went to the old house, where my mother was enthroned in the armchair with a quilt over her legs and a bowl of brown sugar water in her hands, sipping like an empress. Why are you here? She frowned. I sent for your wife. Mom, Fenghua's pregnant, I said. You knew that. Know it? She said, indifferent. What of it? I had 5 children and I was never this delicate. I didn't argue the point. I laid down the rule instead. You fell. You need tending. Fine. But 3 daughters-in-law take turns. 1 date each. Fair and even.
If you think Fenghua should come, then so should big brother's wife and third brother's wife. And if none of them come, Fenghua doesn't come either. She exploded. You unfilial wretch. How did I raise such a son? And slammed the sugar water down hard enough to slop it over the table. My father put down his pipe and tried the gentle angle. Fenghua's more attentive than the other 2. She could take good care of your mother. And I turned to him, softer, but no less set. Dad, I know. But Fenghua's 10 weeks along, and it's not stable. She comes here, cleans up after mother, does the wash and the cooking, And if she strains herself sick and loses the child, who answers for it? He went quiet. I'm not saying I won't serve mother, I said. She's my elder. Of course we serve her. But Fenghua's in no state, so on Fenghua's turn, I'll come myself. Then I rolled up my sleeves and did it. Filled the water vat, wiped the stove, washed the dishes and swept the floor.
Went out to the yard and split a whole pile of firewood and stacked it neat by the kitchen door. My old knee complaining the whole time, while my mother sat in the main room and listened to her son chop wood, and something moved behind her face that she didn't have a word for. She was remembering the boy who'd always been the most filial, the one who yielded to everyone, who did whatever she said, and trying to find the seam where he'd changed, and finding it exactly at the day the household split, and understanding, maybe for the first time, that he hadn't gone cold at all. He just wasn't going to let his wife bleed for her comfort anymore. I put the axe away and dusted off and told her, I'm done for today, Mum. Tomorrow's big sister-in-law's turn. The day after is third sister-in-law's. I'll come again on ours. And at the door, I turned back and gave her the one line that mattered. Fenghua's carrying your grandchild. If you want that child born safe, don't make trouble for her. And I left. My father sat in his pipe smoke where I couldn't quite read his face, but there was something in his eyes that looked a lot like a man who'd finally found a son he could look up to. What I'd done, though, wasn't just protect my wife. I'd handed my mother's favoritism a mirror, because the moment the other two daughters-in-law actually had to take their turns, the whole rotten arithmetic of who she'd spent 20 years bullying and who she'd spent 20 years indulging was going to come due. I just had to let it. And it came due fast. Day 1 was Fenghua's turn, and I came and did the work. Day 2 was Wang Lihua, who showed up and sat in the main room cracking sunflower seeds. Mom, pour me water. She poured it, sour-faced. Mom, sweep. She swept, and didn't get the dust up. Mom, make lunch noodles. She made noodles that were water with no egg in them. My mother swallowed it, because Wang Lihua was not a woman she dared cross. Day 3 was Yang Hongxia, the third brother's wife, who was worse. She brought a ball of yarn, sat down, and knit a whole morning without lifting her head. Hongxia, pour me water. Mom, pour it yourself. I can't stop mid-row. And my mother got up on her bad leg, leaned on her crutch, and nearly went down again fetching her own water, and said nothing. Because the third son had been spoiled, and his wife came pre-spoiled, and my mother didn't dare. You see the shape of it. For 20 years she'd had exactly one daughter-in-law she could order around, and it was the honest one, the one who didn't fight back, Fenghua. She dumped every chore and every insult on the one who wouldn't bite, because she was scared of the two who would. And now that the honest one was off the board, protected behind a husband who said no, my mother was left with the only two she had left, and they had no honesty in them at all. By day 5, it detonated. Wang Lihua refused outright. Why isn't Li Fenghua coming? So she's pregnant. Pregnant women can't wipe a table? When I carried Tiedan, I worked the fields to the day I delivered. My mother said Fenghua wasn't well. Wei Dong said she couldn't come, and Wang Lihua went off like a string of firecrackers. She's faking. She's dodging. Look at them now. Shop and bicycles. Gone rich and gone arrogant. No respect left for us poor relations. And then the sentence that cut my mother to the bone. You're so biased. Li Fenghua skips and you say nothing. We come and you pick at everything. Look at the third son's wife knitting while you fetch your own water. You don't dare say a word to her. You only ever bully the honest ones. And she threw down the apron and walked out. Day 6. My mother told Yang Hongxia to pour water, and Yang Hongxia slammed her knitting on the table. I didn't marry into the Lin family to be a maid. Find someone else. And left, and didn't go to her own room. She rode straight home to her parents. The third brother came roaring in that his wife had run off, and it was mother's fault. What was he supposed to do now? And my mother sat in her empty main room and wailed to the rafters that she'd raised a litter of ingrates, that she'd fallen and nobody cared, that she might as well be dead. My father squatted on the threshold in his pipe smoke and said not one word, and his hand shook a little around the stem. The whole village had it by nightfall, the way villages do. When Mingzi leaned in at the shop to whisper that the old house was at war, sisters-in-law fighting mum, third wife bolted home, third brother making a scene, mum crying. I didn't stop chopping and I didn't look up. Aren't you going back to check, third brother-in-law? Check on what? I said, plating the stir-fry. Let them make their noise. What's it to me? I'm not the village chief.
I rode home past the old house that night, with its lights burning and my mother's crying leaking out over the wall, and I pedalled faster and went by. Because I'd worked out the arithmetic of that house a whole lifetime ago. The child who cries and makes trouble gets fed, and the one who bears everything quietly gets bled. I'd spent one life being the quiet one. I wasn't paying that bill twice. A few days later, I rode home with a big cardboard box lashed to the back of the bike, and the old folks sunning themselves at the village mouth spotted it first. "What are you hauling, Wei Dong?" "A television," I grinned.
It went off like a bomb. A 14-inch black and white, a little over 400 yuan. Tickets got through a connection. 400 yuan. More than a year of a worker's wages, and half the lane crowded into my yard to watch me carry it in. My own family's television, bumped with my own hands, for my wife and daughters to sit in front of at night. Not borrowed, ours. Which is exactly what threw the old house's arithmetic into the light. Because my parents, it turned out, had quietly bought a television for the third son and a wristwatch for the eldest brother's wife. Real money, spent freely. And for the second son's family, the one that gave the most and got the least, nothing. Same song, second lifetime. So I went to the old house and I sang it back to them, in front of whatever neighbors had drifted in to gawk. "Since you bought a TV for the third son," I said, "and a watch for the eldest sister-in-law, then buy my family a sewing machine. We should have had one when we married. It's not too late to make it right. And if you won't, then pretend you don't have a second son at all." And I pushed the door open and walked out, and the neighbors scattered out of the way. And behind me, my mother went white and slumped on the kang, and my father squatted in the doorway tapping a pipe he couldn't get lit. I didn't lower my voice for any of it. When Feng Hua asked if I wasn't afraid I'd broken my parents' hearts, I said, "Broke their hearts? When they were busy playing favorites, did they ever once think about mine? The more you swallow, the more they pile on." I'd finally torn the mask off the thing, and now they knew what it felt like from the other side. And out in the lane, the neighbors were saying it too. This Lin's second son's become a different man. Well, who wouldn't? Of 3 sons, only his family took the loss. The way that family did him was flat wrong. The crowd of witnesses I'd once dreaded had turned into the jury, and the jury had come in on my side. That, it turns out, is what a public reckoning is for. 3 days after that, my father came to me. Evening, hands behind his back, that hunched walk, standing at the gate a while before he came in. I was mending a stool in the yard, and I said, "Dad," and he grunted and sat on a low stool and smoked a while without a word. Feng Hua poured him water and took the children inside, so it was just the two of us. And then this man who had spent a lifetime never saying a kind thing, said the thing. "Wei Dong, I've turned the other day over in my head for 3 days now. Dad knows you've eaten bitterness all these years. Your mother's biased, and I didn't stop her. That's on me." And he took a cloth bundle out of his coat and set it on the table. A wad of bills and a receipt. "I had Uncle Liu get a machine ticket. Butterfly brand, 140. Go collect it from the co-op in a couple of days. I bought a watch for the eldest brother's wife and a TV for the third son. Your father buys you a sewing machine." And he stood, slow, and walked to the gate, and stopped without turning around, and his voice went rough. "Wei Dong, watching you learn to fight, I can't say it right. You used to be so easy, and I thought it made my life simpler. Now I think it wasn't simpler. It was just me being a fool. Now that you've won, your father's relieved." And he went, hunched, his shadow pulled long by the low sun. Feng Hua opened the bundle and saw the receipt, and her eyes filled. Not for 140 yuan, but because it was the first time in the whole history of that house that the old place had ever put something back into ours instead of taking something out. "Dad understands," she said softly. I said nothing, because I knew exactly how much my father understood. He was a shade better than my mother, only a shade. And the reason he understood now was that I'd made a scene. If you don't make the scene, you get nothing. The crying, troublemaking child gets the treat. It was an ugly lesson, and it was a true one, and I made myself learn it in this life the way I'd refused to in the last. "Keep it," I told her. "It's ours." And it nearly emptied them. I heard later my mother screamed at my father, "Are you mad? A watch? A TV? And now a sewing machine? How much have we got left?" And my father said the quiet thing that had been sitting in his chest for decades. "The second son is also our son, and you only ever gave him anything when he forced you to." Less than 200 left in the house,
their whole funeral fund. My mother lay on the kang and blamed it all on the second son making trouble. If he hadn't kicked up a fuss, none of this would have happened. And my father looked at her and thought, but did not say, the thing he'd swallowed for a lifetime. And if he doesn't kick up a fuss, does the second son just go on suffering forever? Some things he'd kept behind his teeth for decades. He kept them a while longer. But I could see it now. The old man was, in his slow, stubborn way, finally on the level. By April, the shop wasn't a shop anymore. It was a phenomenon.
Not just the machine factory men. Cooks from the co-op, the post office, even the town government canteen were sneaking over to eat, going home and trying to reverse engineer my braised pork, and failing. Because you can be told every spice in the pot and still not have the 10 years of standing next to Master Sun that lived in my wrists. Somebody would ask, Master Lin, what do you put in this? It smells like heaven. And I'd smile and say nothing. Not to guard a secret, but because the secret wasn't tellable. 3 months in, I did the sums. Near 3,000 yuan clear of costs and rent and wages. 3,000, in a village where a strong labourer pulled maybe 100 at year's end. I'd made in a season what most men made in a lifetime of seasons. So I set 2,000 aside as working capital, 300 for emergencies, and took the rest to the county to spend on people who'd earned it. First stop, the department store bicycle counter, glass case full of flying pigeons and forevers and phoenixes gleaming under the fluorescent tubes. A 28-inch forever, 180. A 26-inch Phoenix women's bike, dark green with a red ribbon on the bars, 160. I counted 340 onto the counter and said, I'll take both. And the clerk actually looked up, because plainly dressed men don't buy 2 bicycles at once. Mingji's eyes came out of his head. The forever's yours, I told him. Your old one groans like it's dying. I'm tired of listening to it. His mouth hung open. For me? Don't want it? Yes, 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 yes! And he rushed the bike and touched the frame with shaking hands and rang the bell over and over, a grown man gone to pieces over a bicycle, because nobody had ever handed Li Mingji anything he hadn't whined for. Ride it home, I said. Don't race anybody. And he wobbled off around the store grinning like a fool with the wind in his hair. And I stood there and remembered the lacquered hair layabout in the floral shirt who demanded I buy him a radio 6 months back, thin as a bug-eaten stick, and looked at this tanned, straight-backed, bright-eyed young man who worked harder than anyone and wouldn't take a raise, and I thought, a person really can change that far if somebody just puts a hand under his elbow at the right moment. Then the counter, where I picked out a women's watch for Fenghua, Shanghai brand, small silver face, and had it wrapped. Fruit off a street stall, apples, oranges, bananas, all the things she liked. 2 pounds of white rabbit for the girls. And I rode home behind Mingju, who rode with his spine like a flagpole ringing his bell at everyone we passed. Fenghua was washing clothes in the yard, fuller in the face now, the sallowness gone, the belly just starting to show. Look what I got you, I said, and wheeled the dark green Phoenix up to her, and she went still. A bicycle? Women's style, I said, for the town and the market. She walked around it, touching the frame. How much? Not expensive. How much is not expensive? 160. She gasped. And then, oh, and this. I took out the watch and put it on her wrist myself, the silver band bright against her skin, and she looked down at the little hands ticking, and the tears came off her face and dropped onto the crystal. Don't cry, I sighed. I'm not crying, she said, turning her wrist over and over. I'm just happy. Mingzhe rolled back in from 3 victory laps of the village, saw the watch, and hollered, Third sister, third brother-in-law bought you a watch? And Fenghua lifted her wrist to show him with a smile in it I hadn't seen in 2 lifetimes. Pride, and joy, and the plain thing of being cherished out loud in front of people. If you're going to bleed money, bleed it, I told the pot. What's the point of earning it if you never spend it? Then came the return visit to Fenghua's parents, her first proper one carrying the baby, and it turned into a quiet massacre. I loaded up 2 cartons of filter cigarettes and 2 bottles of Yanghe Da Chu for my father-in-law, a length of soft, light blue dacron for my mother-in-law, 5 pounds of meat, egg cakes. Isn't that too much? Fenghua said. Not much, I said. It's been too long. I want to show the old folks respect. And we rode over, and my mother-in-law's face split with joy, and my father-in-law hefted the gifts and couldn't keep the smile off. Why buy so much? It's a waste. While it plainly wasn't a waste to him at all. And there were the 2 brothers-in-law, right on cue. Liu Fumin, the commune accountant,
pen clipped in his Zhongshan pocket, hair oiled. Sun Donghai, the co-op purchaser, loud. They'd brought a bag of apples and a bag of oranges and some co-op pastry between them, and their eyes did the math on my cigarettes and wine the second they hit the table. Then over dinner, they started the recital, the way they always did. Liu Fumin's been named an advanced worker again. Only 3 slots in the whole commune. Might make deputy section chief this year. Sun Donghai's co-op got the only Dacron in town. People beg through connections to buy it. And then the needle, tossed underhand at me. Wei Dong, how's business for you individual operators lately? Not how's your shop. You individual operators, with the little curl on it that meant peddler. All right, I said, peeling a fishbone. Enough to eat and drink? And the eldest sister piled on. Self-employment's unstable, here today, gone tomorrow. A steady-state job's worth far more. And Liu Fumin nodded along, and Feng Hua put her chopsticks down with her jaw tight. I patted her knee under the table and did it with a smile, which is the only way it works. Big sister's right, I said. Self-employment is unstable. But I'm the kind of man who's built for working on his own, can't stand being managed, can't stand all the roundabout dealings, which sounds on the surface like a peddler admitting his lot, and lands, if you're a small official who spends his days on exactly that management and those roundabout dealings, like a slap you can't file a complaint about, because the man delivering it is smiling and being humble about himself the whole time. Liu Fumin's grin froze. Then, before the eldest sister could recover, I set the cigarettes and the wine in front of my father-in-law. Filter tips, easier on your throat than dry tobacco. Keep the wine and drink it slow. And his eyes lit up, and the 2 brothers-in-law's 2 Yuan fruit sat there on the table next to it, doing all the talking that needed doing. And then I closed it. There's one more thing, I said, and looked down the table at Mingzhe. Mingzhe's doing well in my shop. Willing, hard-working, never lazy. Starting next month, his wage goes to 40. His chopsticks hit the table. 40? 40? You can run the braise on your own now, I said. Worth the price. And the whole table did the arithmetic and went quiet. Because Liu Fumin, the commune accountant, made 38.50 a month, and Sun Donghai, the co-op purchaser, made 42, and a 20-year-old who'd washed dishes for half a year now pulled even with them. The eldest sister blurted it out half sour. Mingzhe, your third brother-in-law's awfully good to you. And Mingzhe, mouthful, delivered the unintended killing line. Of course, third brother-in-law treats me better than my own brother. My father-in-law lifted his cup with a hand not quite steady and said the thing he'd never have said a year ago. Wei Dong, handing Mingzhe to you, I'm at ease. And here's the part I hadn't scripted. Feng Hua fought her own corner. When the second sister muttered that self-employed people just throw money around, my quiet wife, who used to sit in that house and take whatever her sisters dished and never dare a word, set down her bowl and said, Second sister, Wei Dong isn't extravagant. Mingzhe's paid for the work he does, that's fair. And when it went around again in the kitchen, money can buy anything. She turned from the dishwater and said, Wei Dong has money. He earned it himself. He's good to our parents because he remembers they didn't scorn him for being poor and married me to him anyway. He's a man who remembers a kindness. There's nothing about a man who earns clean to look down on. The room went quiet. My wife had found her voice, and it turned out to be a good one. Riding home in the failing light, she pressed her face to my back and said, Thank you for today. Thank you for making me able to hold my head up. And I freed a hand to hold hers and told her, From now on, you say whatever you want. If the sky falls, I'll hold it up. She didn't answer, but her grip closed tight. What I couldn't see from the bicycle were the 2 beds across the valley where the seed I'd planted was already sprouting. The eldest sister lying awake poking her accountant husband. Mingzhe makes 40 and you make 38.50 after all these years. Maybe we should go self-employed. And him snapping that a steady job was safe for life, and her going quiet with the thought lodged in anyway. And Sun Donghai, 10 years at the co-op, salary crept from 20-something to 40-something. Lying in the dark, realizing for the first time that his safe job maybe wasn't so safe, and wondering what a man like me would be in 2 more years. The disdain was turning, all on its own, into something that itched. I didn't have to say another word. The numbers were doing it for me. My mother, denied at every door, tried the front one last. She came to the shop itself, sat down on a stool in my kitchen while I lifted trotters out of the braze, and pitched me a partnership. The 3 brothers, together, you put in the recipe, big brother puts in the labor, third brother runs the buying, and we split the money 3 ways, all family, all rich together. Her eyes were shining. I smiled the smile that made her nervous and asked my questions. Does big brother know the first thing about braising?
Does the third know heat from a hole in the ground? My recipe took 10 years to build. I teach it to them, they learn it, they open across the street and cut my throat with my own knife. I don't teach it. What do? Light the stove? Chop an onion?
I can hire that off the street for 20 a month. Why would I hand them a tenth of the shop for it? She said they're your own brothers, and I gave her the ledger she'd hoped I'd forgotten. When we divided the house, my timber built Big Brother's walls, and my army money bought the third his bicycle and his sewing machine. And when I came to collect, you all heard what my own brothers called me. Where was own brother then? They didn't hold back 1 inch while they were robbing me. That's all in the past, she said. For me, I told her, there is no past. If they want to share, they pay for it like anyone. 500 yuan, 10%, cash. Can they afford it? They're welcome. Can't? Forget it. I never begged them to come. She shot up. 500? Are you robbing me? And I picked my chopsticks back up and went on plating braise, and told her that if she was here to beg favors for the eldest and the youngest, she should go home. I was busy. Now that you've got money, you don't care about your parents and brothers, she spat. Mom, I said without turning around, you've got it. Backwards. You stopped caring about me first. And Mingzi rolled his tricycle in mid-scene, and I told him the 2 o'clock orders were ready, and my mother looked at the brother-in-law I'd rather trust than her own sons and slammed out. She went home, and the 3 of them cursed me raw and arrived, in the end, at the only fact that mattered. The second son didn't need the old house anymore, and there was no lever left in the world to move him. The prettiest thing, though, happened where I never saw it, under the old locust tree at Zhaojiawa, and it told me the boy I'd bet on had come all the way home. The village idlers cornered Mingzi over his shiny new forever and his 40 a month, and a man called Li Sansheng slid the knife in soft. You've learned the Rojia more. You know the braised recipe by now, haven't you? Why work for another man? Learn it. Go out on your own. All the money's yours. Buy your own TV. Build your own brick house. Why, you'd out-earn your third brother-in-law himself. And Mingzi, the same Mingzi who 6 months back demanded I buy him a radio, put his foot down on the pedal and stopped the bike cold. Say that again, Li Sansheng. The man wilted under it. I'm only thinking of you. For my good? You want me to steal my third brother-in-law's craft and go to war with him? And you call that my good? That recipe he built with his own sweat. He taught me step by step because he trusted me. And you want me to use it to knife him? Who do you take me for? Li Sansheng tried ungrateful child, and Mingzi's voice went up over the whole lane. I, Li Mingzhi, may have been a waste of a man, but I am not an ingrate. He gave me a hand at the bottom of my life, gave me work, taught me a trade, raised my wage, bought me this bicycle out of his own pocket. And you want me to betray him? Anybody says that to me again, don't blame me for what I do. And he rode off without looking back, and the lane went quiet behind him. He told it at his own dinner table, and his father, my father-in-law, Li Guangfu, a man who never praised anyone, put down his cup and said well done, twice, with a relief in his eyes I don't think that family had ever seen. Skills you can learn, he told his son, ability you can build, but character is a lifetime thing. Your third brother-in-law lifted this family up. You do not repay a kindness with a knife. If you ever turn on him, I'll be the first to disown you before he says a word. And Mingzi raised his head and swore he'd stand with me the rest of his life. When it got back to me, I didn't say much, but I'd reached into the fire for that kid on a hunch, and the hunch had grown a spine. Around the Dragon Boat Festival, the wheat came ripe, 5 mu of irrigated gold rippling in the wind, and I did the thing that made the whole village's wives turn on their own husbands. I hired it out. Feng Hua, heavy now, worried I couldn't cut 5 mu alone, and I showed her the arithmetic she'd never once been taught. Cut it myself. It's 5 days, and 5 days dark means the shop shut, and the shop clears tens of yuan a day, so I'd be burning 200 yuan to save the 15 it costs to hire 2 men who finish in 2 days with lunch thrown in. Hiring wasn't lazy. Hiring was math. And besides, you're pregnant and there's a reason. I didn't say the reason out loud. The reason was a field in another life where a pregnant woman worked till she bled and lost the child, and a man knelt in the dirt and prayed to a god who wasn't listening. I don't pray anymore. I do the math myself now. So 2 hired men and I cut the 5 mu in a day and a half, and Feng Hua carried lunch to the field edge, white steamed buns, braised pork, mung bean soup, and the hired men said they'd never once eaten braised pork on another man's job, and the neighbors said Chen Weidong doted on his wife, and at least one village wife went home and asked her husband why he wasn't more like the peddler, and the husband ate in silence and said nothing. 2,000 jin of wheat came into the yard in a dozen sacks, rations kept, seed kept, grain tax set aside, the rest to sell. We won't buy grain this year, Fenghua said, easy in her whole body. Not only won't we buy, I said, we'll sell. And every year after this. You stay home with the children and never think about a field again. Over the ridge it went the other way. My eldest brother and Wang Lihua bent double dawn to dark over 3 mu of high dry land that wouldn't hold water, the 2 little ones trailing behind picking up dropped ears, a whole family's day yielding not 1 full mu, and Wang Lihua straightened her breaking back to see hired men flashing sickles across my field while I stood drinking mung bean soup, and her eyes went red.
Look at the second son's family, she hissed. They hired help. And my brother straightened, looked, went dark, muttered, so what if he's got a few stinking bucks? And bent back to it, because he knew as well as she did that the well between us had run dry the day he'd called my due a robbery. The third brother's 4 mu of broken poor land was worse. Yang Hongxia sitting down in the dirt after 1 row refusing to cut another, telling him to hire help like the second brother. With what money? He snapped. And she had no answer, because a man who hauled freight when he felt like it, and a wife who wouldn't bend never saved a fen, and even their fertilizer money had come from my mother's dwindling funeral fund. Both sons of the same Lin family, the third brother thought, staring across at my lively field. Why the Gulf? I could have told him. The Gulf was every choice going back 20 years, finally showing its face in a wheat field. Then they came to my gate, one after the other, hats in hand and hate in the eyes.
My eldest brother wanted to borrow the threshing machine. Never, please. Always that self-righteous, let me borrow it a bit. And I said a yuan a day, exactly what the production team charged me, deposit on my own head. I'm your elder brother, he barked. Even elder brothers settle accounts, I said. Too dear, go rent your own. The deposit's 10 yuan. And he had no 10 yuan, so he slapped one down on my table with a look full of murder and wheeled it off. Lending's a favor, brother, I told his back. Not lending's my right. And have you ever once done me a favor? Then the third brother drifted in at dinner time. No gift, just a nose for the stewing chicken, and sat down on a stool to wait to be fed. And I told him a family meal for 4 would cost him 5 cents. When your house stews a chicken, I asked him, do you ever call me? When you eat dumplings, do you ever think of me? Why should I do for you what you'd never do for me? He left with his teeth grinding and the smell of the chicken chasing him half down the lane, and he admitted the one thing to himself on the way out. The soft second son they used to ride was dead, and the hard one who'd replaced him lived better than any of them. Fenghua worried, mildly, that I was making the brothers hate us more. Hate us or not, what's it to me? I said, squatting back to my tools. I gave in to them my whole first life, and they took it as their right and hated me the instant I fell short of it. If I'm going to be hated either way, why let them profit off it too? She thought it over and found she agreed. Some people you can pour yourself out for, and they'll count every drop as owed. So let them go thirsty. And we ate our dragon boat chicken, mugwort on the door, coloured threads on Chen Xiaoling's wrist, 2 kinds of zongzi, and when Fenghua wondered aloud what the old house was eating today, I said who cares? And she smiled and let it go, because she didn't really want to think about those people anymore. Neither did I. The last man who tried to squeeze me wore a palm leaf fan and thought he held the deed to my future.
Director Ma, Gao Changming, co-op deputy something, my landlord, waddled into the shop one. Afternoon fanning himself, took in the queue at the braised counter and the packed tables and the steam, and told me, all fake friendliness, that he knew exactly how much I made. Then he named it. The rent was going up. We signed a contract, I said. I paid 6 months after New Year. It's barely been 3. I know, he said, sucking his cigarette. But the house is mine, and the market's changed. 30 a month to 50, starting next month. Nearly double. And when I didn't jump, he smiled the smile of a man playing a card he's sure is the ace. If you think it's too dear, you needn't rent. The contract lets the landlord take the place back on a month's notice. Accept the gouge or pack up and lose every regular you built. He patted my shoulder, told me not to think too long. He had other people asking, and fanned himself back out the door. Fenghua came out of the kitchen furious. He signed a contract and just jacks it. That's naked bullying. The house is his, I said. He wants to raise it. That's his business. So we swallow it? I don't acknowledge it, I said. Because I'd been chewing on something for weeks, and Gao Changming had just chewed it for me. We can't keep renting to do this.
Rent is a rope in another man's hand. Up today, up tomorrow, and he throttles you whenever he likes. If you want a business to grow, you own the ground it stands on. Buy, I told her. How much have we got? She reckoned it. Shop and counter profits plus the old savings, over 5,000 yuan. In 1981, when a worker made 30 a month and 5,000 was 10 years of not eating, enough. Enough to buy a storefront, I said. And enough, I didn't quite say yet, to stop being a tenant in my own life. Because there was more to it than Gao Changming. Fenghua was carrying our third child. 3 children coming up who'd need feeding and clothing and schooling, and this little eatery was enough to live, but not enough to live well. I wanted a real restaurant, one that could book tables and throw banquets. She opened her mouth and nothing came out. A restaurant. She'd never even dreamed the word.
I rode the town half a day and found it at the south end. 3 big brick rooms facing the street, frontage for more than a dozen tables. 3 tiled rooms in the back for living or storage. A broad yard you could shed over and set tables in come summer. And best of all, the spot. 200 meters south of the town center, right on the road to the county, foot traffic all day. It was practically cut to my measure. The owner, an old man named Joe, sat in the doorway with a pipe and a grey face. And when I asked if he was selling, he sighed that he had no choice. His wife's liver, surgery in the provincial capital, over 1,000 yuan he didn't have, and the house was all he could sell to save her. 3,500, he said, for 3 shop fronts and 3 back rooms and the yard. It was a fair price, and I didn't grind him down on it, because I knew what it was to stand in a hospital corridor, short of the money that buys someone you love a few more years. I'd been the man in the bed on the wrong side of that number. I'll take it, I said. One condition. Sign today, 500 down, the rest in 3 days, and we transfer the deed at the housing office.
Old Zhou nearly dropped his pipe. 3 days? And then grabbed my hand, because every day his wife waited was a day closer to the edge. That evening I signed with Deputy Director Sun Hao, standing witness, pressed my thumbprint, paid the deposit, left the deed in Sun Hao's keeping till the balance cleared. Old Zhou clutched his 500 with shaking hands and said I'd saved his wife's life. And I told him no, a fair trade. You sell and I buy, and the rest lands in 3 days, on my word. Sun Hao watched me and said I was a man of principle in business, which was rare, and I thought, it's not principle, it's memory. I remember the corridor. 3 days later, I put 3,000 yuan in old Zhou's hands, and we walked to the housing office, and the property certificate came out stamped in red with one name on it. Mine. Chen Weidong. I stood in the sun outside that office holding the paper, and for the first time across 2 entire lifetimes, I owned a house that was actually mine.
I'd given away timber that built my brother's walls. I'd handed over money that bought other men's furniture and other men's weddings. I died in the 4th floor window of a hospital that a family with 2 houses worth of hidden savings wouldn't spend 80,000 to keep me out of. And now, at 26 years old, the second time around, I held a deed with my own name on it. I went home and put it in Fenghua's hands, and she held it and touched it again, and asked what it said, and I told her. It says this house belongs to our family. She pressed it to her chest and the tears came, and Chen Xiaoling ran up asking why Mom was crying again, and I picked her up and told her Mom was happy. And when she asked why you cry when you're happy, I told her the only true thing. You'll understand when you're grown. The morning after, I walked into Gao Chengming's office while he drank his tea and read his paper, sat down, and told him I'd made my decision. I wasn't paying next month's rent. His smile froze. I'm not renting anymore. He said, stand. Your business is booming. You move and you lose your regulars. And I stood and reminded him the contract wanted a month's notice. Today was the 16th. I'd pay through the 16th of next month and be gone on the day. And I walked out, and he sat there a long while, unable to believe the peddler he'd tried to squeeze had simply stopped playing, and then snorted that he could rent the place to anyone. He'd learn. There are only so many hungry people in a town, and they'd all learned where the good braise was, and it wasn't going to be in his building anymore. So let me tell you where 2 lifetimes have brought me, standing in a doorway I own, on a road that leads to bigger roads. The first time I lived, I gave everyone in the world the chicken leg and ate the feet myself. I gave away my timber, my money, my labor, my years, my wife's health, and my daughter's futures, and I called it being a good man, and it bought me a family that stood in a hospital corridor and decided my life wasn't worth 80,000 yuan. I went out a window on the 4th floor. The second time, I kept the chicken leg. I refused my mother to have face and made my brothers repay what they took. I took the fair share of land and money they'd robbed me of before, and I turned it into a shop with a line out the door and a brazed counter the whole town lines up at, and then into a building with my own name on the deed. I put milk powder in my baby's bowl
and a lambskin coat on my wife's back, and a Shanghai watch on her wrist. And I made her laugh with both dimples showing, and found her a voice loud enough to shut her own sisters up. I protected the child in her belly, instead of letting a field and a spiteful old woman take it. I marched into my brother's house and made a bully apologize to my 3-year-old. I turned a lacquered hair layabout into a man who'd defend me to a whole village and a father who wept with relief over him. I planted an honest cop in my debt against the day a man in a blue suit comes for my sister. And I did every last bit of it without setting myself on fire to keep one other person warm. There's a restaurant coming, tables you can book, banquets you can throw, and a third child, and a wife who no longer flinches when the world looks at her.
My father came around in his slow, hard way. My in-laws call me son and mean it. The brothers-in-law who used to look through me lie awake now, wondering if their safe little jobs were ever safe at all. And out past all of it, down a dusty road, my sister Chun-Li is a town bride in a red dress who called me selfish, riding into a house that's going to
Break her arm 3 times inside a year. I couldn't stop that wedding. But I'm not the ox they all rode anymore. I've got a shop, a counter, a building, a name, a cop who owes me a debt he intends to pay, and a memory that goes forward as well as back. When the Wang family finally reaches for my sister, they're going to find out that the soft brother from the old story died in a hospital window, and the one who came back keeps the chicken leg and settles every account and does not forget. The loudspeaker at the village mouth is still playing its old song about the fields of hope. First lifetime, I never believed a word of it. This one, I'm building the hope with my own 2 hands, and I'm just getting started.